What do you swear you saw, but don't have any proof of? 1. Not my story, but my brother's. He lost his wallet and was retracing his steps looking for it. A homeless man approached him at a coffee shop and said to him, "Don't worry, it's in the bathroom sink. Your wallet is in your bathroom sink." Later that night he did indeed find his wallet at home in the bathroom sink. A few days later he saw the same homeless man and thanked him for his help. The guy became really irritated and told my brother he had never seen him before. Could have been a lucky guess, but I think magical bum makes for a better story. 2. When I was about 10 they started putting missing children on milk cartons. Every morning for a while I was looking at this boy's face on the side of the milk while I would eat my cereal. Then one day a car went down my street while I was playing outside, and there was a boy in the back seat with his face up close to the window looking out. I'm 99% sure it was the boy from the milk carton. I told my parents but they didn't believe me. 3. I was at the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. I walked up to the cuttlefish tank and for some reason all 20 or so of the cuttlefish rushed over to me. It was a big tank, maybe 10 feet long. I walked the length of it, and they followed me. I walked back, and they followed. A few other people saw and tried it themselves. But alas, the cuttlefish only had eyes for me. My best guess as to the cause was that the guy who feeds them is my doppelganger. 4. As a child I touched some weird pest plant in our garden, I think it stung me. Then I saw everything in inverted colors for short time. And then back to normal. I was in such a shock, I couldn't explain it to my mom. I just went to her crying. 5. I slipped on icy stairs last winter and swear I saw my own butt crack as I fell. No one believes me. 6. My friend and I were watching basketball in the early days that Charles Barkley was a panelist. He was apologizing for calling a team midgets and saying that he now knew it was offensive. But as they were going to commercial, we both heard him say over a hot mic, "Besides, they shouldn't hate me, they should hate God." My friend and I were amazed, and convinced he would be fired. But not only did we never hear about it again, the clip doesn't even exist online anywhere, it's as though we had a double delusion. 7. One time when I was really young, maybe like 10 years old, I came home after school and was making myself a salami sandwich. I pulled the bag of salami out and took out 2 slices. I smacked the 2 slices together, and suddenly they became one. I tried my hardest to separate them, but there was no seam or anything that I could split them up with. I even showed it to my mom, but not a single person believed me when I told them. I had fused 2 pieces of salami together. What secret will you take to your grave? 1. We had an old cat growing up named Tuna. He was 16 or 17 and had a long and happy life but was really deteriorating. My mom did not want him put down as it was her cat, and she seemed to be in denial about how decrepit and near death this cat was. One day she comes home from the store and my dad calmly tells her that he found Tuna dead under a tree in the sun. She was happy he died peacefully and on his own terms. What she doesn't know is that she actually ran him over as she was leaving for the store. She obviously didn't feel him under the tire, but my mom killed her cat and we all lied about him dying in his sleep. 2. Best friend told me how much he hated his girlfriend and that in 2 weeks when he completed his move he was going to break it off. He died the next morning. She'll never know how unhappy she made him. 3. That I absolutely hate my wife's special casserole. I stomach it down with a smile because she and our kids love it. 4. In Dutch, when you boil an egg and then place it into cold water to make it easier to peel an egg, it's called to scare the eggs. One day when I was about 6 or 7, my mom asked me to scare the eggs. So, little joker I was, lifted the lid of the pan and yelled, "Boo!" My mom cracked up and has been telling this story ever since, for over 20 years. She's come to love the story and still truly thinks that I wanted to really scare the eggs. Truth is I knew what scaring an egg meant and only wanted to make her laugh because she was in a sad place and time back then. It's made her laugh for over 20 fucking years. That means it's the best joke I've ever pulled off and I'd die before I'd let her find out I was just kidding. 5. Riding in the car with one of my best friends. He suddenly has a very distressed look on his face and frantically starts stuttering about needing to find a restroom. I will never forget the sound not 10 seconds later of him shitting himself in the driver's seat. I laughed my ass off all the way back to his house. I promised I'd never tell anyone. 6. When I was 15 I was walking through the woods and saw my principal having a toss-off session under the trees. No one would have believed me so I said nothing. But god damn it Mr. McCann. I know what you do in your spare time. 7. I got my cousin pregnant but she had a miscarriage. We haven't told anyone nor will we ever. 8. Junior year of high school, my class was registering for next year's classes, so they brought us down to the computer lab. But there weren't enough computers for everyone. Knowing one of the counselors very well, she has me use the instructor computer at the front of the room. Well, just so happened that another counselor was logged into that computer, so full permissions. So, in addition to registering for next year's classes, a couple of my B's turned to A's from past classes. A few months later, I barely beat out a good friend for a scholarship because my GPA was slightly higher. Guys, what's the most obvious hint you got from a girl that turned out not to be a hint? 1. In high school I had a best friend I was secretly into. She invited me over to her parents' house after school every Friday. Her parents were never home and she literally would strip naked as soon as the door closed and invite me to join in as well. I'd comply. Then nothing. We'd sit on the couch and watch TV eating popcorn, both of us buck-ass naked. After 3 weeks of blue-balling visits I tried to kiss her. Total recoil, and then she tells me she's only into girls. Sigh. Later that summer she invited me to a family BBQ. Everybody there was naked including her parents. Apparently everyone in that family just liked getting naked. 2. A drunk girl one night once approached me in KFC and said she loved my hair. I said thank you. She then proceeded to chat and called me really good looking. I responded, as a joke / playing it cool. Oh, you flirt. She responded, I'm not flirting. And stormed off. I collected my chicken and left needlessly deflated. 3. Laughing hysterically at every joke I told. Turns out she was just a lesbian who apparently genuinely thought I was fucking hilarious. 4. This is gonna get buried, but I made plans with a girl once to come over for dinner and a movie, platonically. When we got to the movie portion, she took off her pants, laid beside me in my bed. I made a move. Till this day she claims she was only getting comfortable and wasn't interested. She's my wife now, and I tell the kids she made the first move. 5. This happened in my last year of high school. I had a crush on a girl in band. I played clarinet, she played flute. We were both in the first row, so we sat directly across from each other, and naturally looked at each other during rehearsals. At our school, all the graduating band kids were allowed to write a short blurb which would be included in the program for our spring concert. Anyways, concert day rolls around, and I'm hanging around backstage, flipping through the program waiting for the parents to start arriving. I eventually get to her blurb. Her favorite band memory was looking across at a certain clarinet player. Turns out it wasn't me. 6. The girl I liked asks me, hey, do you want to go to prom with me? I said, yes of course. And she said, great. We're all going in a group, and you can be Mildred's date. Like, was Mildred waiting for me once World War II finished? 7. Girl literally told me, I have a crush on you. I then asked her on a date and she said no, WTF. 8. Her wink was a disorder. What are obvious things you've just become aware of? 1. I was told a couple weeks ago that hay was just dried grass. I thought it was its own thing that grew and I just never saw it. 2. I had no idea that peanuts grow underground until the other day when I saw a video on Reddit. I think I always assumed they grew on, like, I dunno, a peanut tree? Peanut bush? I was flabbergasted. 3. I thought when people said you can't stare at the sun it was because it was a really hard thing to do, like a skill rather than the truth, which is it damages your eyes horribly. So I'd boasted how I could stare for up to 3 minutes before I had to look away. Glad I didn't take you can't breathe underwater literally too. 4. I thought the semicolon tattoo was for people who had Crohn's disease or colon cancer or something and had lost part of their colon. 5. I didn't know babies only drink milk for the first 6 months and that water can be toxic for them. 6. Cigarettes are just a cute name, baby cigars. I never made the connection for some reason. 7. My roommate and I googled what is pepper? The other day because we realized we had no clue if black pepper was a plant or a mineral. 8. A fortnight is called that because it's 14 nights. 9. That ponies are not baby horses. 10. That Squidward and Squilliam from SpongeBob are just the names Edward and William but with squee in the beginning. 11. That as a person with a vulva, I can simply slide over the crotch of my swimsuit to pee. No need to take off my wet, cold one piece and drag it back on again after I pee. My husband shared this magical method with me. Who is the kindest, rudest celebrities you've met IRL? 1. I met Tyler the Creator at a Chick-fil-A in LA and was terrified to ask for a photo but did so anyway. He agreed very sternly on the firm condition that I hold the sauce for his nuggets, and so in the photo I'm holding the Lil packet. But in the background he is absolutely cackling with laughter. He then broke the facade, dapped me up, said he loves pranking people like that, and proceeded to ask me all about my life for 5 to 10 minutes. He also shared some fairly intimate details of his own life. A strange and beautiful man. 2. I was an extra on The Last of Us and met Pedro Pascal. He was super nice. We technically weren't allowed to talk to the talent and they'd usually ignore us, but he and Gabriel Luna talked to us anyway. 3. My sibling has a terminal illness in the 80s and Make-A-Wish sent our family to the set of Knight Rider to meet David Hasselhoff. Was cool. But that's not what matters. Fast forward 30 years and I'm at Heathrow picking up a family member when I see the Hoff standing there on his phone. I approach him and wait for him to end his call. He looks at me and says hello. I tell him that we met. He looks at me and say, was their name blank? He remembered their name after 30 years. That will always stay with me. 4. Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively live relatively close to my hometown and show up to this Christmas event every now and again that our town puts on. Walked out of the ice cream parlor downtown and sitting on the bench right outside is Ryan Reynolds eating an ice cream cone. I looked up at him as I was walking out and made eye contact. And I looked away, then I looked back to make sure it was him, and he looks me dead in the face and goes, I know right, isn't it crazy? And then he gets up and walks away. 10 out of 10. 5. Ian McKellen came to the spa I worked at and was absolutely lovely. We didn't sell ice cream but there was a farm shop across the road and I mentioned it and he asked me if I'd take him there. My friend who worked in the farm shop had his mouth open the whole time seeing me buying ice cream with Gandalf. 6. Back in 2004ish John Cena and Batista gave me a spot at the gym at like 5 a.m. Super nice guys. Saw me on the bench press working alone and just walked over unprovoked to spot me. We talked for a little bit and finished our workouts together. Gave me a couple pointers. I've always rooted for them to succeed since then. Redditors that have gone on Tinder dates, what was your worst and weirdest experiences? So I found a cool chick. She was into cars, into guns, drank and cussed like a sailor, looked great, she had the sexy resting bitch face. I was so ready to smash. Well, she hits me up and says she's going to a car meet and was gonna pick me up. I was so down for that. So she texts me saying, hey, I'm outside. So I run out and I see her in her car, walk up and say what's up, and that's when it hit me. This bitch has the angles. Good God, she had saddlebags hanging over the seat of her car. This bitch was enormous, so I played it cool. I asked her, hey, want anything to drink before we head out? She says sure. So I run in and grab my roommate and say, bro, I fucked up bad. I need a call like a level 10. Mom had a heart attack. Dad had a stroke. Your brother's in jail again but for murder this time and it was your job to keep him out. He laughs his fucking ass off. So I go back out to the car, go to the car wash and I got the call and I put him on speaker. Bro, my brother's in jail again, my mom is gonna kill me, my dad is never going to talk to me again, and my brother's in jail and Nag's head for first-degree murder. I play along like, oh fuck it man, we need to get there and get a bail bond. This is where it gets good. No man. It's cool. Sobbing. I'm just gonna hit the bottle and pull the trigger. She heard that, we jump in the car, I'm doing my best to act panicked and we get to the house and we both run in and there's my roommate, empty bottle of Jack on the ground and a half-full bottle of Jameson tilted up and pressed to his lips and an unloaded handgun to his head screaming, if you take one more step I'm gonna blow my brains out. And she fucking bolted out the door and took off. Always have a bro for an SOS or a level 10 emergency. What are some things you'd only know by growing up poor? 1. How to keep a 7-year-old from knowing she's poor. My mom used to take my brother and me to the soup kitchen every week to volunteer. We must always be kind to those less fortunate, she'd say. Then afterward, she'd say, oh, it's so late, and I don't feel like cooking. Let's just eat here while we're here. I had no idea we were there because we couldn't afford dinner. 2. You go to bed early to avoid feeling hungry. 3. When someone breaks into your house but doesn't take anything. It happened once, and I still find it funny. 4. At every restaurant, you know the cheapest thing on the menu, even when someone else is paying. You're programmed to pick the cheapest option. My friend's mom once said, you sure like hot dogs, that's all you ever order. She had no idea why. 5. Your dad asks you for $20 so he can get to work for the week, promising to pay you back when he gets paid. 6. I'm not sure about other states, but in Minnesota, they can't shut your power off in winter because of the risk of someone freezing to death. Winter was the time to catch up on all the other bills we were behind on. 7. The first part of my childhood, I'd come home from school to an empty house. I never knew if I'd see my parents that night. There were no cell phones back then, and I was always anxious about what would happen if they did show up. So, I started walking to the library every day after school and staying until it closed just to avoid the anxiety. One of the librarians noticed me and took a liking to me. I think she saw something of herself in me. Gradually, we got to know each other. I noticed more books and my favorite genre started appearing on the shelves. One night, I went to McDonald's after the library closed. I was a quarter short for a hamburger, and she saw me asking people for change. Embarrassed, I tried to hide from her after that. Instead of leaving me alone, she started looking out for me. For over a year, she'd drop off chips, granola bars, or soda at my desk in the library. These are extras from the break room, she'd say, even though I could hear her putting coins into the vending machine. Eventually, she started bringing me dinner every night, and we'd eat together in the break room. I opened up to her about my home life, and she became someone I could confide in, a huge relief. One day, a week before school started, she told me to meet her outside after the library closed. She handed me a brand new school backpack filled with supplies, a new outfit, and my first pair of Nikes. That's when I broke down. This single librarian, living off a modest income, had supported me for 3 years. She was more of a friend than I had ever known. She even attended all my adoption hearings to ensure I was placed with a good family. She came to my graduation and my wedding. She watched me grow up and succeed despite where I came from. I went to her funeral this summer, and it felt like losing my mother. I couldn't stop thinking about how much she changed my life. I donate to the library every year in her honor. 8. I'm hungry. Drink some water. We were probably the most hydrated kids at school. Lamau. But the thing I appreciate most is the independence I gained from fixing things myself or not wanting to ask my parents for help because I knew they were struggling too. Guys, what's the best compliment you've ever received from a girl? Last night, I offered one of my coworkers a ride home after work. She's drop-dead gorgeous and always wears open-toed shoes, which I admittedly love. That said, I try not to think of her in that way because she's 18 and I'm 25. Still, I somehow ended up in a temporary love triangle. She accepted my offer to drop her off at her apartment after work. On the way there, she got a phone call from her boyfriend. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but based on her unexpectedly candid responses, it was obvious he was upset with her. Apparently, she had posted a photo on social media showing her drinking somewhere with random guys. She calmly explained to him that the random guys were actually coworkers and that the photos were taken during our monthly office party. However, their conversation grew more heated as she started using words like insecure, immature, and jealous to describe his behavior. I tried my best not to look like I was eavesdropping, though it was impossible not to overhear. At some point, the boyfriend must have realized she was in the car with someone, because her next response was, "No, I'm not in an Uber. One of the guys at work offered to drive me home." She listened to him rant for a moment, rolling her eyes and shaking her head in frustration, before suddenly blurting out, "Yes, he's one of the guys in the photo. In fact, he's the tall guy on the far left with the cute dimples." I was stunned. That was literally the first compliment I'd received from the opposite gender about my looks since my ex-girlfriend broke up with me, granted, for chasing her with a blade during an anger episode I had because of my steroid use. You receive $25,000 every day, but you must endure 5 seconds of random, excruciating agony each day. Here's the deal, once every 24 hours, you will experience 5 seconds of the most unbearable pain any human can imagine. This pain is beyond anything you've ever felt, a 100 out of 10 on the pain scale. Completely unfathomable. It's like the pain of childbirth or a kidney stone, but multiplied by 1,000. Imagine the agony of the Gom Jabbar test from Dune. A level of suffering that no real-life human experience can truly capture. The pain will not cause any lasting physical damage or affect your vital signs. Once the 5 seconds are up, you'll return to normal. It could happen at any time, while sleeping, driving, working, or even in the bathroom. You won't know when it will strike, but it will happen once every 24 hours. There's nothing you can do to alleviate the pain. No painkillers, no sedation, no way to stop it. For every 24 hours you endure this, you'll receive $25,000, tax-free, directly into your bank account. You can choose to stop at any time, but the money will keep coming as long as you complete the challenge. Do you accept the challenge? How many days would you last with the promise of $25,000 a day, knowing the agony you'll experience each time? What are some dirty facts about celebrities? 1. Apparently, Miles Teller is in the closet, or at least people have said he did some less than straight things to get where he is today, primarily to get his role in Whiplash. He supposedly did some not very appropriate favors for the director. I guess this doesn't mean he's gay, but it wouldn't surprise me. 2. Tate McRae is a major Trump supporter. She doesn't talk about many social issues, probably because she doesn't want to ruffle any feathers and upset her fans. However, her burner Twitter account got exposed, and her immediate family is pretty open about the fact that they're major Trump supporters. 3. Ariana Grande has a serious substance abuse issue. If you've seen the commercials for her new movie Wicked, you know what I'm talking about. She looks even worse than Starlight from The Boys. She can't weigh over 105 pounds. Probably doing rocks if I had to guess. It's really sad that most child actors are doomed from the start of their lives. 4. One of the wildest rumors about Marilyn Manson was that he had ribs surgically removed so he could self-pleasure. The story became an urban legend in the late 90s and early 2000s, fueled by his shock rock persona and outrageous image. While Manson himself has denied it, people still bring it up like it's fact, and the rumor just refuses to die. Honestly, it says a lot about how bizarre his public image was that something so outlandish sounded believable to so many fans. Whether it's true or not, it's definitely one of the weirder celebrity myths out there. 5. Chris Pratt is one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but his association with a church accused of anti-LGBTQ practices has raised eyebrows. While he's denied being involved in any discriminatory behavior, the church's history makes it hard for some fans to separate him from its reputation. The fact that he stays relatively quiet about it only adds fuel to the fire. 6. Not sure if anyone else noticed, but Robert De Niro doesn't turn down roles, ever. He's been in a lot of garbage movies toward the end of his career. This is because he struggles to pay alimony for his 14 children. Always get a prenup, kids. 7. Beyoncé and Jay-Z are the ultimate power couple now, but their relationship started with a pretty uncomfortable age gap. When they first started dating, she was 18 and he was 30. A lot of people gloss over that, but it raises eyebrows when you think about it. 8. Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeff Epstein has been widely criticized, and he's faced allegations of sexual misconduct with a minor. While he's denied the accusations, his disastrous BBC interview and subsequent retreat from public life only fueled suspicions. The royal family has done everything to protect him, but the scandal isn't going away. What's the dumbest thing someone has said to you? 1. After giving a coworker an aspirin, she came to me some time later and said the medicine was useless because the pain had gone away on its own. 2. Once, I had a friend who bet me $20 that a stop sign had 6 sides. 3 months later, we were reminiscing, and he remembered it incorrectly, betting another $20 that a stop sign had 6 sides, and lost again. 3. I am a veterinarian. My cousin is a child psychologist. Her exact words were, "You just don't know what it's like when your patient can't tell you what is wrong." 4. I was at a register, and the cashier was flirting with me. He asked where I was from, and I said, "England." He then asked, "Oh, what language do they speak there?" I replied, "English." The guy behind me in the queue burst out laughing. 5. In an office that was low on paper, someone suggested, just put a blank page in the copier and make more. 6. How do they put the lines inside the oranges in the factory? You know, the ones that make them easy to separate into slices? 7. I worked in a bank, and someone came in trying to cash a check for their grandfather, who was in the hospital. I explained that we couldn't cash it without the grandfather being present, as the check was made out to him. The person then picked up a dog and said, "I have his permission to cash the check. See? This is his dog." I was at a loss for words. I tried to keep a straight face as I explained that a dog was not a valid form of identification. 8. I was in a long-term relationship, and we were thousands of miles apart. I thought it would be romantic to say, "If we both look up right now, we can see the moon together." She asked, "Are you sure we're looking at the same moon?" 9. I had a professor in college who watched Pirates of the Caribbean once and became convinced that the word parlay meant guidelines. Instead of giving us the guidelines for the class, she handed us a list of parlays that we were expected to follow. 10. I was working in retail, counting down my drawer and ensuring the cash total matched the receipts. I came across an unbelievably shiny penny. Someone had either just gotten it from the bank or broken it out of a collector's set, realizing that a penny is unlikely to become more valuable in their lifetime. I held it up to my assistant manager and said, "Wow, what a shiny penny." She responded with, "Oh my God, do you think it's counterfeit? Why would anyone go through the trouble and expense of counterfeiting a penny? At most, after all the effort, you'd still only have a penny." 11. The day after giving birth to my second child in less than a year and a half, my mother-in-law told me, "You're not a real mom if you're only going to have 2 kids." This came from a woman who didn't raise any of her 6 children and left them with a man who wasn't even biologically related to half of them. 12. My ex's mom came over for supper for the first time at my house. I'm a widow, and she was asking questions about my late husband. At one point, she asked about the funeral. She's a harmless, sweet lady who doesn't always pick up on social cues, but I genuinely liked her. I mentioned that my husband had been cremated and that his ashes, along with our cat's ashes, were kept in a cabinet. She walked over to the cabinet, looked at the 2 urns, one smaller with paw prints, and asked, "Which one is your husband?" Cops, what's the saddest thing a criminal has ever said to you? We got a call from a store clerk one day reporting a robbery at gunpoint. When we reviewed the footage, it was one of the strangest things I'd ever seen. The suspect pointed a firearm at the clerk, who handed over a large wad of cash. But instead of taking all the money, the man refused it and only took a single $50 bill. Then, instead of bolting out of the store, he went to the back and grabbed a few loaves of bread, some butter, milk, socks, and a few cans of tinned meat. He returned to the register, paid for the items with a $50 bill, and even left the clerk with the change. His face was clearly visible on the footage. While the financial damages were minor, it was still an armed robbery, and we were required to track him down. Later that night, I found him entering a worn-down apartment building. I did my job, placing him in the back of my squad car and heading toward the station. On the drive, I tried to lighten the mood by joking, "I've never seen someone rob a store like you did." But he didn't laugh. He stared at me and said, "Oh, you think what I did was funny?" Caught off guard, I stumbled through my words. "I mean, it's not that, I just think, you think what?" He interrupted. "You think I want to go around terrorizing people like that? You think I enjoyed making that dude fear for his life? You want to know why I did it?" I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I got a kid, man. 3 of them. They're home alone right now because their mama would rather be out drinking than taking care of them. My youngest daughter didn't have socks. None of them had bread to eat. And today, for the first time in their lives, they had bread with butter. Bread with butter, dog." His voice cracked, and tears welled up in his eyes. "You know how much of a failure I gotta be for my kids to have never tasted bread with butter in their lives? And guess what? They all still hugged me and called me the best dad ever when I made it. So don't joke about what I'm doing for my kids. You got it?" By this point, he was sobbing, and his words hit me like a brick. I couldn't bring myself to take him to the station. Instead, I turned the car around and drove back to his apartment. When we arrived, I uncuffed him and told him he was free to go. I asked him to promise never to rob anyone again. Before he left, I handed him the $20 I had in my wallet. He hugged me tightly and cried. I never saw him again, but I pray every day that he found a way to make things better for his kids. That encounter stuck with me and changed the way I view people forever. You must survive 1 year in the last show you watched. You are suddenly transported into the world of the last TV show you watched. You appear in the middle of a scene, fully immersed in that universe. Along with you, you can bring a single object from any book you have read in the past year. This object could help you navigate, protect yourself, or even change the outcome of your situation. Every month, a random enemy from the last video game you played is unleashed into this world. The enemy begins 200 miles away from you but always knows your exact location. As time passes, the enemy gets closer, and you must figure out how to survive while evading their pursuit. This could involve battling a creature or enemy from a survival game, dodging an assassin, or facing a force of nature in a fantasy world. Your environment will follow the rules and logic of the TV show, meaning you will face the same dangers, stakes, and scenarios as depicted in that universe. If the show involves high-stakes survival or combat, you must confront those challenges directly. Each enemy will adapt based on the mechanics and characteristics of the game it originates from. This could range from zombies, rival survivors, or supernatural forces. How will you navigate this world? What strategies will you use to survive? How will you prepare for the monthly hunts? Will you rely on your wits, the object you chose, or try to manipulate the world around you? When did you realize your dad was a horrible person? 1. When I came out as transgender, my dad was distant but said he was trying to understand. I figured he just needed time to adjust. A year later, I started getting harassed online, anonymous messages calling me slurs, saying I was an embarrassment, and even mocking personal things that only someone close to me would know. One day, my mom caught him typing furiously on his laptop and discovered he was behind the messages. He had created multiple fake accounts just to harass me. When I confronted him, he said, "I was trying to toughen you up. The world won't go easy on you." I cut him out of my life that day, realizing I couldn't trust someone who was supposed to protect me. 2. When I turned 16, I wanted to go out with my friends to celebrate. We planned to hit a few bars. My dad freaked out and said, "No daughter of mine is going to bars." I tried explaining it was harmless, but he wouldn't budge, calling me irresponsible and saying I was trying to act older than I was. Meanwhile, he'd let my brother stay out all night at the same age. It was the first time I realized how controlling and unfair he was, and it completely ruined my birthday. 3. When I got my first paycheck at 16, I was so excited to finally have my own money. My dad saw it and said, "You owe me rent now that you're working," and took half of it. I later found out he spent it on beer. That was when I realized he saw me as a piggy bank, not his kid. 4. When I was in my early 20s, my mom sat me down and told me she and my dad were divorcing. I was shocked because they always seemed happy or at least functional. Then she dropped the bomb. My dad had been cheating on her for 8 years with his best friend, who also happened to be a guy. Looking back, it all started to make sense. The constant guy trips, the late night hangouts, the inside jokes that felt too personal. I confronted him, and he didn't even deny it. He just said, "Your mom and I were never really in love like that." It wasn't just the betrayal of my mom, it was realizing how much of his life and ours had been a lie. 5. My dad always promised to come to my soccer games but rarely showed up. One day, I saw him at the park playing golf with his buddies while my team was playing on the field next door. When I asked why he didn't come over, he said, "I didn't want to embarrass you." I realized then he'd always choose himself first. Has anyone walked into a bar and then found it was filled with a biker gang? What happened? 1. Shortly after my divorce, my daughters and I were returning from a trip to the ocean. They mentioned they were hungry, so I stopped at what I thought was a mom and pop restaurant. The name was still the same, so I didn't realize it had changed until we entered. The waitress stopped us and said we had to eat in the roped-off area because my girls were too young to sit in the bar. The rest of the bar was filled with bikers in leather vests and chaps. We settled down and ordered dinner. Near the end of our meal, one of the bikers approached and asked if my girls enjoyed fishing. He ended up sharing his hidden fishing spot in Mount Rainier. A couple of other bikers came by to tell me I was one hell of a dad for taking care of my daughters, especially since my older daughter is disabled and in a wheelchair. When we went to leave, the waitress told us our bill had been paid. By then, the bikers had left, so I never got to thank them. They were a surprisingly nice bunch of guys. 2. Around the time I was 28 or 29, I was helping manage one of my family's ice cream stores, which was about 30 miles from my house. After finishing a long shift, I was driving home when I had a blowout on the freeway. Since this was pre-cell phone days, I limped off the nearest exit. It was dark, and I realized I was in the middle of strawberry fields. I saw a light down the road and managed to drive slowly into the parking lot, which turned out to be a biker bar. Scared and alone, I called my husband, who told me he couldn't come because he had a race the next morning. He suggested I ask someone in the bar to change my tire. Terrified, I walked into the bar in my pink ice cream store uniform. All eyes turned to me. I stepped to the end of the bar and asked if there was a gentleman who could help a lady with a flat tire. The toughest looking guy there looked me up and down, asked how old my car was, and then offered to help. He changed my tire, and while working, he told me about his kids and showed me pictures of his 2 sweet little girls. When he was done, I told him I didn't have any money to give him. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, darlin'. A lady should always be able to ask a gentleman for a favor." That night changed my view of bikers, and my husband. 3. I'm retired from the Navy and was working at a small hospital when an ambulance brought in a biker who had passed away in an accident. My colleague and I wheeled the body down to the morgue. The morgue assistant was about to cut the biker's jacket off, but I stopped him and carefully removed it intact. After processing the body, I took the jacket to the biker clubhouse. The gatekeeper asked why I was there, and I explained the situation. I was invited inside, a rare honor for a non-member. I respectfully handed over the jacket and promised to call when the body was ready so they could place the jacket back on him for burial. From that day on, I was always welcome at the clubhouse, though I only visited a few times. Anytime I ran into one of them elsewhere, I was treated with great respect. 4. My wife, 4-year-old daughter, and I were on a cross-country trip from Colorado to New York. Somewhere in Iowa, I stopped at a rest area, leaving my wife and daughter in the car. When I returned, I found a gang of scary-looking bikers surrounding my brand-new Taurus SHO. Expecting trouble, I cautiously approached. To my surprise, the leader complimented me on the car. One of the bikers noticed my daughter sleeping in the back seat and signaled the group. They quietly rolled their bikes away from the car before starting their engines so they wouldn't wake her. 5. The other way around, in the mid-70s, my college friends and I were at a bar when a group of bikers barged in. We froze, thinking the night was about to turn ugly. Instead, the burliest biker, who looked like Immortan Joe from Mad Max, Fury Road, walked over to the piano and treated us to an unforgettable evening of incredible music. 6. I used to manage a bar restaurant. One night, about 8 bikers came in and asked if they could have a few beers and play pool. I told them it was no problem. They became regulars, coming in a couple of times a week. Only once did I have an issue, when one of them overindulged. A couple of his buddies helped him out nicely, and the next day he came in to apologize. I never had a problem with him after that. 7. My friend Fred, a 65-year-old public defender, and his son, a teacher, were at a hotel bar when they befriended a young man with a learning disability. The young man got a little drunk, so Fred and his son offered to drive him home. On the way, he begged them to stop at a rough-looking biker bar, saying he knew people there. Reluctantly, they agreed. When they walked in, the bikers looked intimidating. The leader approached Fred, stared him down, then broke into a smile. "Hey, guys, this is my lawyer. He got some evidence thrown out and kept my ass out of jail. Now he's bringing my little brother home." Fred was warmly welcomed and later became an honorary member of the club. What's the real-life plot twist that sent your life in a completely different direction? Just a few days before my wife gave birth to our twins, she told me she didn't want me in the delivery room. I was shocked and heartbroken. When I asked why, she shrugged, apologized, and refused to elaborate. She broke down crying, begging me to stop asking because it was causing her unwanted stress. I held her in my arms, trying to comfort her, but my heart was heavy with confusion. On the day of her labor, as she prepared for delivery, I told her I'd wait in the hallway in case she needed me. That's when she dropped another bombshell. She didn't want me in the hospital at all and told me to go home and wait for her call when it was over. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I trusted her blindly and went home, crying the entire drive back. For the next 13 hours, I sat in agony, unable to make sense of why my wife didn't want me near her. Then, I got the call, but it wasn't from her. It was the hospital, telling me I needed to come in immediately because they had something to tell me. My heart sank. In my sleep-deprived state, I broke the speed limit rushing to the hospital. When I arrived, I was greeted by the team, and the first words out of my mouth were, "Is my family okay?" Tears were streaming down my face, but instead of answering, a nurse handed me an envelope. The front of it read, "I'm sorry, my love." They told me my wife had left it for me and gave me space to read it alone. Trembling, I sat down and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter from my wife, dated the night she told me she didn't want me in the delivery room. Her words shattered me. She confessed that she was alive and healthy but didn't want to be a mother. She had thought she wanted children, even convinced me to become parents, but 8 months into her pregnancy, she realized she had changed her mind. She started resenting the babies for changing her body and disrupting her life. She apologized repeatedly for leaving me with the burden of raising twins alone but wrote that she had to do what was best for her. At the end of the letter, she revealed she was leaving the state, with no intention of returning. She told me I could throw out her belongings and even our wedding album because she didn't want any ties to her old life. I don't think I've ever sobbed harder in my life. I brought my twins home that day, utterly broken. It's been 4 months since then. Life is hard, unbelievably hard, but I'm doing my best. My twins are my everything now, and while the pain hasn't gone away, I'm trying to rebuild my life for them. Do burglars really avoid houses with dogs? 1. I worked for several years as a critical care transport medic for the Texas prison system, and I spent a lot of time in the back of an ambulance, whiling away long rides talking with my patients. Every single one said the same thing about dogs. Even the presence of a noisy little chihuahua would make them move on to a less hazardous house. And the thought of encountering a large, quiet dog was terrifying. There were plenty of other houses. I trained my dogs, especially the big ones, to sit quietly behind me as I talked to visitors at the front door. Those door-to-door magazine salespeople or fundraisers for causes you've never heard of, who are really just trying to find out who's home during the day and get a peek into your house, always get a good eyeballing from my chief of security. 2. My dad was a cop, and back in the early 70s, he had a pit bull. If he was at home and someone approached the front door, the dog would let out one quiet, almost whispering bark. He'd then stand next to the door, watching, but he wouldn't make another sound. Dad always wondered what would happen if he wasn't home, and eventually, he found out. One night while Dad was at work, someone broke into the house. Thunder, the pit bull, apparently sat in the dark in complete silence, patiently waiting for the burglar to close and lock the door. He then relieved the perp of much of his clothing and a large part of his backside. Dad came home to find the living room littered with scraps of bloody fabric and the inside of the door covered in frantic, bloody handprints. The guy got out. It turned out it was a drug addict who lived down the block. He was easy to find by following the trail of blood down the sidewalk. Dad didn't have him prosecuted, although they did have an in-depth conversation about the young man's future. The guy told Dad there was no way in hell he'd have broken in if he'd known about the dog. He moved away within a week. 3. I live on the border of a rough neighborhood. I also have 5 dogs of varying sizes, large to small. One day, a thief stole something from a local store on the edge of our property. Well, the thief wasn't aware of my animals, so he sneaked around to retrieve his stolen items, only to be met by 2 of my most protective dogs. The police told me they chased said thief for over a mile. In fact, the only reason they knew who the thief was is due to my dogs chasing him. Anyhow, fast forward a year, we still aren't locking our doors or concerned about burglars. I pulled up at the local Ghetto Fab gas station across the street from the store the thief stole from. A guy noticed my van with a decal for my dog business on it. He asked if I could train his pit bull. I asked, "How did you hear about us?" "I don't train dogs, rather I bake dog treats for high-end pet stores," but he piqued my interest. He said, "Oh, I heard about your dogs chasing the guy who stole from the store." "Ah, I see. So it appears everyone in my Ghetto Fab neighborhood thinks I train animals to chase off thieves. House secured." 4. This happened to a friend twice, both with the same outcome. The friend was a breeder of Rhodesian Ridgeback dogs. When everyone in the house went out, the dogs, bar one, were put out into the garden with kennels, etc. One dog was always left in the house. The friend came home from work to find a teenager standing in her kitchen. Her first thought was he was a friend of her son. Her next thought was that there was only one dog in the house, and if her son was home, all the dogs would have been in. Also, the dog in the house hadn't rushed to greet her but was sitting by the stranger. The poor boy was terrified. The dog had let him come in but was certainly not letting him leave. The police found it very amusing. The same thing happened with the second one, but they had the misfortune to come over the garden fence to several large hounds rather than just one. Another friend had much the same thing happen. He had a Rottweiler. The dog had been in the garden enjoying the sunshine. The owner went indoors to get a drink, etc. When he came out, he heard a little voice saying, "Help, please help." The gate leading to the back garden was to the side of the house. He looked there, and there was a man with a duffel bag full of stolen goods from the house next door pinned to the wall by the dog, big paws on his shoulders. My friend found this hilarious, as not 10 minutes before, the dog had been chased around the garden by the family's pet rabbit. 5. I live in an area where, I kid you not, there are 11 drug dealers within 100 meters of my house. I've had many people start to break in, kicking the door, breaking a window. Only one was stupid enough to try and get in after the dog started barking. He was not bitten, well, not on the skin, but when I came out of the shower, he was on top of the fridge with his pants and shirt looking like he had gotten into a fight with a lawnmower and lost. After that, only the newcomers would try to break in, and you would not think meeting my dogs on leash or running the streets when they manage to open the door that they are mean or aggressive. But come into my house uninvited. I have German Shepherds, and my third dog is a Lab Shepherd pit mix. Good luck to anyone stupid enough to try and hurt me. The last guy ended up with 144 stitches in his arm. 6. My brother-in-law is a dentist, and he does some charity work at the prison. He always chats with the inmates and asked one what he was in for. The man said that he was a burglar. My brother-in-law asked, since he was getting expensive dental treatment free of charge, could he give him some tips on how to secure his home? The burglar replied, "Buy a dog." When asked why a dog was better than other security measures, the man said that dogs are too unpredictable. Alarm systems, gates, and locks all work as designed. With dogs, there are too many variables. 7. My dad was a police chief, and when I moved to my first apartment, I asked him this question. He told me that a professional, top-notch burglar will not be deterred by an alarm system or a dog. If they want something you have, they will find a way to get it. He then pointed out that almost all burglars are opportunists, and even the very few professionals aren't all that good. He said that if 2 houses are side by side and one house has an alarm or a dog, or both, and the other does not, the burglar will always choose the easier house to rob. Unless you have something extremely valuable that is blatantly visible, such as an expensive laptop that someone could smash a window and grab. What made you feel like a kid again today? My husband and I took our 6-year-old son to his classmate's birthday party. We arrived on time, and the kid's parents welcomed us warmly. However, upon walking in, we realized our son was the only other child there. My heart absolutely sank. The birthday boy was so excited about what he called his mega awesome party, and his parents told us how he had helped them set everything up. He had baked cupcakes with his mom, helped his dad move his gaming setup into the living room, and even spent his entire savings, $25, on goodie bags for his friends. We were friends with the kids' parents, so we stayed for tea while waiting for the other guests to arrive. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. An hour went by, and still, no one else showed up. By this point, the birthday boy was crying in his room, convinced nobody liked him, and our son was trying his best to comfort him. The boy's mother went upstairs to check on him and came back 15 minutes later, her eyes red from crying. I gave her a big hug, holding her as she tried to compose herself. Then my husband came up with an idea. He asked if their son liked playing with his parents. When the mother nodded, he leapt out of his seat and said, "Perfect. My wife and I don't have any plans anyway. How about the four of us join in and party with him? We'll play video games, do dress up, eat some cake, all that good stuff. Everyone immediately agreed. We went upstairs to the boys' room, where his dad flung open the door and announced, "Enough crying. Time to show you guys how the adults can party. Who wants to join us?" The boy looked up, a cheeky grin spreading across his face. "Like you guys were partying in the bedroom last night?" he asked his dad. My husband burst out laughing while my jaw dropped, and the parents turned bright red. The dad quickly recovered and said, "No, son, not that kind of party. I mean a Nerf party." With that, he pulled a Nerf gun from behind his back and started shooting at the boys before tossing them 2 more Nerf guns. The kids immediately dove for cover behind the bed and a chair, firing back with peals of laughter. We ran downstairs screaming, grabbed more Nerf guns and ammo, and split into 2 teams. The 2 kids teamed up with my husband while I stayed with the parents. For hours, we ran through the house, laughing, yelling, and shooting each other with foam darts. Every time we ran through the kitchen to grab snacks and refuel, we all felt like carefree kids again. Watching the actual kids run around with huge smiles on their faces made the whole experience even sweeter. But we didn't stop there. At one point, my husband drove to a nearby costume store and came back with cheap superhero outfits for everyone. We all dressed up and had superhero battles. The 2 boys became the city heroes, trying to stop the 4 of us villains from stealing the code to the last slice of cake. We laughed so hard we could barely breathe, and we didn't stop until it was well past bedtime. When it was finally time to leave, the birthday boy gave us the biggest hug and thanked us for making it the best birthday he'd ever had. It was a day none of us would forget, and for a little while, we all got to feel like kids again. Cage fight any animal for $10,000 per pound. Here's the deal, you can select any vertebrate animal to face off against in a fight. The payout is $10,000 for every pound the animal weighs, provided you win. The animal will weigh its average weight for its species unless you specify a reasonable variation. For example, no ridiculously light or heavy versions like a 100-pound rabbit. You can't choose the body composition of the animal. A 400-pound human could be muscular or overweight, but you don't get to decide. The fight will take place in an environment tailored to ensure fairness for both you and the animal. For instance, if you pick a fish, the arena will include both land and water. If you choose a deep-sea creature, it won't suffer from pressure differences. You'll fight in your current physical state, with no time to train, no weapons, and completely naked. The animal will be in an aggressive state, ready to attack you as soon as the fight begins. The match ends when one of you is incapacitated or after 10 minutes if it goes the full duration. If the fight lasts the full time, a panel of 3 impartial MMA judges will decide the winner based on performance. The animal will be cloned, so ethical concerns, such as harming endangered species, are not an issue. What animal would you choose to fight, and what strategy would you use to win? Which celebrity do you think doesn't deserve their fame? 1. I've heard some pretty unsettling stuff about the Outdoor Boys and their whole adventure family brand. From what I've gathered, their dad pretty much fakes all of the outdoor skills and survival content, acting like he's some expert when, in reality, it's all scripted and staged. The worst part? I've also heard that he's actually pretty abusive behind the scenes, especially towards his kids. I've heard from people who know them personally that the whole family dynamic is really toxic, and what they portray online isn't even close to reality. His wife cheats on him all the time, and he probably uses all of this as a distraction. I don't think they deserve the fame they've built off of a facade and the exploitation of their kids for views. 2. Amber Heard. Honestly, I'd never heard of her prior to the Johnny Depp stuff. She got a lot of attention, but much of it seemed to stem from drama rather than actual acting talent or anything noteworthy. It just feels like her fame is tied to controversy rather than accomplishments. 3. Cardi B. While she has some musical talent, I think a lot of her fame comes from controversy on social media rather than skill. She started as a reality TV star and just continued to push the boundaries with drama rather than being recognized purely for her craft. Also, her heinous actions towards men are disgusting. 4. Drake. I think he's talented, but his fame has ballooned into something far beyond just his music. He's more of a meme and pop culture figure at this point, and I feel like it's mostly because of his social media presence and mainstream appeal rather than his actual artistry or innovation. 5. Tyga. The guy is famous mostly for being part of the Kardashian orbit and dating younger women. His music has never been anything special, but somehow he's managed to stay in the spotlight. I just don't see what makes him stand out in the music world. 6. Will Smith. Don't get me wrong, he's been in some huge movies, but I think a lot of his fame comes from his public persona and image rather than his actual talent. He's known for being a likable guy in the industry, but when you look at his performances, I don't think he's done anything extraordinary compared to other actors. What's the weirdest meal you were ever served at a friend's house, as either a child or an adult? 1. I was invited to the home of a distant cousin for dinner. He and his wife were always snobs. No matter what you did, they would try to one-up you. If you painted a room blue, she would walk in and say something like, "Oh, blue," in a condescending tone. It didn't matter what it was, they always had a put-down. I took my new girlfriend over with me for dinner. When we were called to dinner, I said, "Oh, smells good. What are we having?" The wife looked down her nose at me and said, "Poindexters." We are, of course, having Poindexters, as if there was nothing else in the world as good. My girlfriend had gone to the bathroom and hadn't heard this. She returned, sat at the table, and said, "Oh, Poindexters, yummy. They used to feed us these at summer camp." This was basically saying that Poindexters were cheap enough to feed 500 kids. My cousin's wife was appalled and said, "Oh, these are East Coast Poindexters," as if the ones from the East were better. My girlfriend replied, "Oh, I know. We used to catch them in Newfoundland and sell them to the dog food factory." 2. I used to have a friend who thought I was overweight. She was super skinny and an exercise nut. Personally, I thought she looked awful. Her skin was stretched tight over her bones, and she didn't look healthy. She constantly sent me information about health problems caused by being overweight. Yes, I could have stood to lose some weight, but I ate a healthy diet, was active, and had no health issues. Once, she invited me to lunch. She made lemon mint ice water, which was really good, so I thought, cool, she made a nice lunch. She bustled around the kitchen and finally brought out a dessert-sized plate with 3 little pizza roll-type things. I can't remember what they're called, but they're about 2 inches long and an inch wide, and a small salad made of lettuce, a tomato slice, and some shredded carrots with creamy dressing. I ate it, of course, because I'm not rude, but the pizza things were salty, as was the dressing. All the while, she lectured me on portion control. I smiled and nodded while eating my tiny, unhealthy meal. That was the last time I saw her. She continued to send lecturing emails and articles about losing weight. I finally blocked her. I bet good money that, even with my extra 10 or 15 pounds, my low-salt, low-fat, veggie-heavy diet has kept me far healthier than her tiny portions of unhealthy food lifestyle. 3. When I was about 8, I was invited to a friend's house for dinner. I was told we were having meatloaf, vegetables, and mashed potatoes. I had the meatloaf and veggies, but then I was given a whole cooked potato, some milk, and butter. I watched my friend mash her potato, then mix in milk and butter. I did the same, but that's not what I thought mashed potatoes were. 4. I come from a very small, extremely Caucasian town. If you saw someone who looked black, Asian, or Polynesian, they were undoubtedly a student at our small college. The town did have one African American family and one refugee family from Laos. The Laotian girl was in my high school class. I was always friendly to her, so she invited me to her birthday party. She invited several classmates, but only I and one other person showed up. She was excited to see us, and her family was very hospitable, though only the girl spoke English. The party had cake, but it also had wonderful, strange food I had never seen before, stir-fried vegetables, tangy spices, and delicious mysterious noodles. But what fascinated me most was the sticky rice. They served us big globs of it to eat with our hands. I still remember it to this day, as I've never seen sticky rice since. I don't know if it's just a Laotian thing, but it was amazing. 5. This wasn't exactly weird, but it was unexpected and extremely disappointing. As a child, I made friends with an American girl who lived nearby. After a few weeks of playing together, her mother called mine and asked if I'd like to join Millie for lunch one day. I was thrilled, picturing something like my usual lunches, fried fish and rice, pork chops and mash, or barbecued chicken wings. Maybe something exotic, since they were American. Imagine my disappointment when lunch turned out to be a plate of jam sandwiches and a glass of Ribena. Not even a whole sandwich, just 2 slices placed together and cut into quarters. We each got 2 quarters. Lunch. They called that lunch. I had never been so deceived in my life. What are some things you'd only know by growing up poor? 1. How to keep a 7-year-old from knowing she's poor. My mom used to take my brother and me to the soup kitchen every week to volunteer. "We must always be kind to those less fortunate," she'd say. Then afterward, she'd say, "Oh, it's so late, and I don't feel like cooking. Let's just eat here while we're here." I had no idea we were there because we couldn't afford dinner. 2. You go to bed early to avoid feeling hungry. 3. When someone breaks into your house but doesn't take anything. It happened once, and I still find it funny. 4. At every restaurant, you know the cheapest thing on the menu, even when someone else is paying. You're programmed to pick the cheapest option. My friend's mom once said, "You sure like hot dogs, that's all you ever order." She had no idea why. 5. Your dad asks you for $20 so he can get to work for the week, promising to pay you back when he gets paid. 6. I'm not sure about other states, but in Minnesota, they can't shut your power off in winter because of the risk of someone freezing to death. Winter was the time to catch up on all the other bills we were behind on. 7. The first part of my childhood, I'd come home from school to an empty house. I never knew if I'd see my parents that night. There were no cell phones back then, and I was always anxious about what would happen if they did show up. So, I started walking to the library every day after school and staying until it closed just to avoid the anxiety. One of the librarians noticed me and took a liking to me. I think she saw something of herself in me. Gradually, we got to know each other. I noticed more books and my favorite genre started appearing on the shelves. One night, I went to McDonald's after the library closed. I was a quarter short for a hamburger, and she saw me asking people for change. Embarrassed, I tried to hide from her after that. Instead of leaving me alone, she started looking out for me. For over a year, she'd drop off chips, granola bars, or soda at my desk in the library. "These are extras from the break room," she'd say, even though I could hear her putting coins into the vending machine. Eventually, she started bringing me dinner every night, and we'd eat together in the break room. I opened up to her about my home life, and she became someone I could confide in, a huge relief. One day, a week before school started, she told me to meet her outside after the library closed. She handed me a brand new school backpack filled with supplies, a new outfit, and my first pair of Nikes. That's when I broke down. This single librarian, living off a modest income, had supported me for 3 years. She was more of a friend than I had ever known. She even attended all my adoption hearings to ensure I was placed with a good family. She came to my graduation and my wedding. She watched me grow up and succeed despite where I came from. I went to her funeral this summer, and it felt like losing my mother. I couldn't stop thinking about how much she changed my life. I donate to the library every year in her honor. 8. I'm hungry. Drink some water. We were probably the most hydrated kids at school. Lamau. But the thing I appreciate most is the independence I gained from fixing things myself or not wanting to ask my parents for help because I knew they were struggling too. What's your best insult without using a single profanity? 1. I envy the people who haven't met you yet. 2. Are you upset because of your haircut? 3. You look easy to draw. 4. You need to stop thinking with your mouth. 5. My buddy once got banned from Facebook for a month during COVID for calling someone an absolute potato in an argument. 6. You're impossible to underestimate. 7. All your teachers handed back your tests face down, didn't they? 8. I've been called worse by better. 9. When your parents said you could be anything you wanted, this is what you landed on. Hey. 10. Were your parents related? 11. Wisdom chases you, but you're faster. 12. You are not the person Mr. Rogers thought you could be. 13. I saw this one recently and it cracked me up. In response to someone's dumb and false comment, someone simply replied, "Child left behind." 14. I used to be a prosecutor and once got a letter from a woman in prison. I joked to a colleague, maybe I could get a date. He shot back, you couldn't get a date in a women's prison with a fistful of pardons. 15. You know you're the reason no one likes you, right? 16. Letterkenny has some great ones. My favorite, your spare parts, bud. 17. May you have the day you deserve. 18. Do you have any other symptoms? 19. Your mother was a hamster, and your father smelled of elderberries. A classic from Monty Python. 20. I have neither the time nor the crayons to explain this to you. 21. Is your head just for decoration? What's the creepiest display of intelligence you've seen by another human? 1. I knew a guy who worked in retail and had the uncanny ability to memorize customers' credit card numbers after seeing them just once. 2. A friend once showed me a guidebook he'd written about how to handle his girlfriend. He had taken detailed notes on her likes, dislikes, and past gifts, complete with her reactions to each one. He documented which actions triggered which responses and even wrote down specific phrases he could say to achieve certain outcomes. He had strategies to calm her down if she got mad, ways to make her feel loved if she was upset, and a whole system to get her off his back so he could go back to doing whatever he wanted. It was somewhere between oddly sweet and disturbingly manipulative. 3. My sister, hands down, and it's an ongoing thing. Dishwasher broken? 10 minutes of YouTube later, she knows the what, the how, and the why, and she'll have it fixed in half an hour if the parts are in stock. Car making a weird noise? FaceTime her, pop the hood, crank the engine, and she'll identify the issue and give you estimates from 3 local shops. Random archaeological discovery mentioned in passing on the news? She's already read the journal article and can connect it back to a dig in chili from the 80s. Complex Thai recipe she's never tried? Glances at the instructions twice, then makes a restaurant quality version on the first go. She remembers your coworker's sister's boyfriend's birthday, and that he prefers chocolate sprinkles over rainbow ones. She's gotten a feral dog to eat out of her hand, bathed it, and diagnosed a leg injury from 10 paces away. Her bosses constantly try to promote her, but she refuses because it would cut into her jam-making time. Yet, when there's a problem no one can solve, they all go to her first and listen the moment she speaks. Her husband swears he once heard her ask the general manager, "What flavor of stupid did you eat for breakfast this morning?" And the manager actually apologized for his mistake. She insists she just has a good memory, but I don't know, man. It's handy having her on my side, but if she ever decides to take over the world, we're all screwed. 4. When I was in med school, I was tangentially friends with a guy who never attended lectures. He skipped all labs, all tutorials, everything. The night before our second year finals, he showed up at my house and casually mentioned he had spent the past week watching every lecture at 2x speed. Dude placed in the top 10 out of 300 students on every exam. And it wasn't just rote memorization, he had a deeper, more functional understanding of the material than most of us who actually showed up every day. I always shuddered to think what he could accomplish if he actually applied himself, but he was perfectly happy just coasting through life. 5. I once knew a 14-year-old boy helping his dad drywall a house. He stood at the bottom of the staircase, looked at the shape of the stairs, glanced at the drywall sitting on the sawhorses, then cut the drywall without taking a single measurement. The piece fit so perfectly that it slid into place like it was giving the stairs a hug. No measurements. Just pure spatial awareness. 6. I once worked with a lady who had spent her entire career counting pills in a pharmacy. One day, she glanced at a container of ibuprofen labeled as having 100 pills and said, "That looks off." We recounted it, there were 99 pills. One missing pill. My mind was blown. You're given a choice, never having to shower or never having to poop. You're presented with 2 options, never having to shower again or never having to poop again. Here's how they work: never shower again. With this power, you're always clean, fresh, and hygienic without ever needing to step into a shower or bath. Your skin remains free of dirt and oils, and you naturally smell great no matter what. However, you'll still need to handle things like styling your hair, shaving, or other grooming habits that aren't directly tied to cleanliness. While you'll never have to worry about bad hygiene, you'll still need to manage the aesthetic aspects of your appearance. Never poop again. If you choose this option, you'll never need to defecate again. Your digestive system functions perfectly, but waste is magically removed before it reaches your bowels. You won't feel bowel pressure, discomfort, or any health issues related to digestion. However, you'll still have to urinate on a normal schedule, and your body otherwise operates as it does now, minus the inconvenience of bathroom trips for number 2. Both powers come without any hidden drawbacks or consequences. You simply gain the benefit of removing one of life's recurring annoyances. So, would you embrace the freedom of never showering while staying perfectly fresh? Or would you choose the relief of never needing to poop again? Which power would improve your life the most? What is something you would never tell anyone for the rest of your life? 1. When my brother was courting his now wife, he wanted to give her a handmade scarf. Seeing that others were giving hand-knit scarves, he tried knitting one himself but failed miserably. So, he bought one online and asked the seller to make it look a bit flawed. When his girlfriend received the scarf, she was moved to tears, thinking it was a genuine gesture of love. Now, whenever they argue, she puts on the scarf and sits quietly. My brother always gives in, thinking the scarf might give away its secret. 2. 2 years ago, while studying at home for graduate school exams, I had a moment of frustration. Out of nowhere, I grabbed my dad's cigarettes and smoked a few puffs in the bathroom. I'm a girl, a straight-A student, very introverted, and had never even dated before graduating from college. The cigarette smoke was harsh, so I threw it in the trash. 2 hours later, when I came out, I found the bathroom filled with thick black smoke. The cigarette had set the trash on fire. The toilet was scorched black. That night, my dad and mom teamed up and gave my little brother, who was in high school, a beating. They didn't give him any money for a month. The thing is, my brother actually smoked at that time, and he thought he had accidentally caused the fire. Now, 2 years later, I've graduated. But every time I see that burnt bathroom, I still feel sorry for my brother. 3. When I was little, my dad was a night shift taxi driver, so he slept during the day and could fall asleep within seconds. One time, while we were watching TV, he suddenly started snoring. I thought he was pretending, so I took his lighter and briefly burned the bottom of his foot. When he didn't react, I thought he was really good at pretending, so I kept at it for about 10 seconds until he suddenly jumped up with a yell, clutching his foot. I just stood there, dumbfounded, still holding the lighter. The beating that followed is something I remember vividly to this day. 4. When I was a kid, I skipped school and went home. My dad caught me and asked why I wasn't at school. In a panic, I lied and said the school collapsed. My dad froze, then called the village committee to send people to rescue the children. I didn't know that when my dad was young, the school had actually collapsed, killing many students, some of whom were his classmates. The trauma was so deep that he didn't question my lie. Many parents, just off work, frantically called the school, but the lines were jammed, further fueling the panic. Before long, our entire village rushed to the school, with parents crying and screaming, riding motorcycles, driving cars, and even running on foot. That was the first time I got a beating, with no one to plead for me. My butt didn't just hurt, it went numb. 5. In middle school, my mom bought a case of 8 treasure kanji. I secretly opened it and drank several cans, then carefully put the empty cans back and resealed the box with tape. Later, my mom unknowingly took the case as a gift. Now, 4 years after graduating from college, I still don't dare to confess. 6. When I was a kid, our family was poor. One time, an aunt gave me 2 pieces of beef jerky, the kind wrapped like candy. I thought they were delicious and hid them under my pillow, eating a little bit each night. I made those 2 pieces last over a month. 7. As a kid, I imitated others who would spit when entering a bathroom. The problem was that, unlike normal people who have phlegm, I had nothing. So, I just gathered saliva and spit. Honestly, I don't know why I picked up such a silly habit. But unfortunately, it became ingrained, like the Pavlovian conditioning of a dog with a bell. I now salivate like crazy every time I enter a bathroom. It's so embarrassing. 8. In college, I'm a guy, I sleep hugging a doll. Recently, I've been sleeping with a Kuromi doll. My roommates didn't know until one night I turned over too quickly, and Kuromi fell to the floor. Now everyone knows I sleep with a Kuromi doll. 9. When I was little, I peed in the pot of porridge that was cooking at home. The whole family drank it. 10. As a child, I was mischievous and once peed on a big rooster. It pecked me on the groin, and I was in pain for half a month. For a couple of days, my mom noticed I was walking funny, so I finally confessed. She saw that my groin was swollen and blue, so she handed me a bottle of iodine to apply. It took a week to heal. Cosplayers, what's one cosplay you will never do again and why? 1. Stormtrooper. I had a custom-made Stormtrooper suit that fit me perfectly, but it was incredibly uncomfortable. It was hot, I couldn't see, and I'd be lucky to take it off without cutting myself. Never again. 2. Batman. A kid yanked on my cape, and it pulled off my helmet and back piece. They were all connected as one piece of armor, and I couldn't put them back together on my own. It was a disaster. 3. Daredevil. I couldn't see anything. Total sensory deprivation. 4. Waldo. From Where's Waldo? This wasn't exactly cosplay, but I went to a Halloween party dressed as Waldo. Terrible idea. Everyone wanted me hiding in the back of their photos, and I heard, haha, I found you. At least 800 times. Never again. 5. Gilgamesh. I cosplayed as Gilgamesh with full anime plate armor, all 3D printed. I spent 8 grueling hours trapped in a plastic cocoon. It was hot, I couldn't breathe, and I ended up with serious chafing, welts, and blisters everywhere. On the way home, I twisted the wrong way, and snap, the armor broke. I was so fed up that I threw the entire costume in the nearest trash bin and finished the journey home barefoot, in cycling shorts, and a red cape. 6. One of the 300, from 300, I'll never be in that kind of shape again. It was a one-time deal. 7. Link, from The Legend of Zelda. I dressed as Link and got the usual, oh hi, Zelda. Which was funny. But I also got grilled by some nerdy guys about my dedication to The Legend of Zelda. They acted like I wasn't a true fan unless I played their favorite game in the series. If I said I had played it, they'd then quiz me on every detail to prove it. Honestly, a girl can cosplay as anyone and still get harassed. 8. Motoko Kusanagi, from Ghost in the Shell. I dressed as Motoko in her full-tech suit, made of Gore-Tex. Within 30 minutes, I had heat stroke. I haven't worn it since. 9. Faye Valentine, from Cowboy Bebop. I didn't mind the comments from awkward guys, but I got tired of other female cosplayers telling me that Faye is a good starter cosplay, implying it wasn't intricate enough. The condescension got old fast. 10. Lord Business, from the Lego Movie. Never again will I cosplay as Lord Business or any Lego character. The head was too heavy, and I could barely move. It was exhausting. What are the biggest turn-ons your crush has done? 1. I was in a hot tub with this girl I had a huge thing for and a few of her friends. She decided to get us some drinks and beer from inside. As she was coming back and handing it out to all of us, her bikini came undone, both boobs out and right in my face. I was riding that high for at least a week. 2. I was about 14 and at a water park waiting for my friends to change. They had doors on the changing rooms, and as I was sitting there, a changing room door slowly opened. A girl about 20 was fully naked and sliding down her panties. She looked up, and we made eye contact. She smiled, winked, and slowly closed the door. My friends all came out oblivious to what had just happened, and I had to walk with my towel in front of me for a long time. 3. I was visiting a friend and keeping an eye on her kids while she was taking a shower. Her daughter wanted my phone so much that I gave it to her, and she ran off to the bathroom. The daughter asked her mom, who had just gotten out of the shower, to take a picture of her, I guess. She came back and said, "Look at the picture mommy took of me." What they didn't realize was that the daughter was standing in front of a mirror when the picture was taken. I started rolling, laughing, and told her to go show her mom the picture again. The next sound I heard was her mom yelling, "Oh my God. Give me that, he better not have put you up to this." We were all completely innocent to this accident. What's the worst thing you can say in an elevator full of people? 1. My mom and dad were in a crowded elevator while my mom was very obviously pregnant to the point of bursting. She looked at my dad and said, "When are you going to tell your wife about me? My parents are happily married." She was just pranking my dad. He said it was the longest elevator ride of his life. 2. My mom, sister, and I went on a vacation. While in the elevator, my sister joked and said, "The reason we brought you here was to break the news, you're adopted." The man in front of us turned around and said, "And I'm your real father." The doors opened, and he walked out. It was the best timing and absolutely hilarious. 3. Pretending to talk on a phone. Well, the doctor will let me know as soon as the test results are back if it's tuberculosis. 4. Before we start, does anyone want to get out? 5. Don't say anything at all, but take the whole trip standing at the door facing in. 6. I'm sorry, I have to do this. 7. That noise your body involuntarily makes right before you're about to puke. 8. Saying the floor numbers out loud. 9. I am a delivery driver, and anytime I'm in an elevator with people, I say, "You hear about all the people who died in this elevator?" 10. Stand in the corner facing away from everyone, bang your head against the wall, and say, "No, I won't do it. No, no, not again." 11. Remember, no Russian. 12. Don't try to be a hero. 13. Wearing an earbud or Bluetooth earpiece and saying, "The target is in the elevator right now." 14. My friend and I used to tease each other. Once, we were in an elevator, and I asked, "Do you still have lice?" We were left alone right after the next stop. 15. It's good to know I'm not going to die alone. People who were born deaf but gained hearing later in life, what objects did you expect to make noise? 1. My friend got his hearing at age 6. He swears to this day that he thought flowers would make some sort of noise and that's what attracted bees. 2. My cousin was born deaf and underwent an operation to recover part of his hearing when he was 12. He sometimes uses hearing aids but can get by without them. His family had a bunny. Of course, he had learned about cows mooing, cats meowing, etc., before his surgery. He was very shocked when he came home and greeted his bunny to find that it made no sound. It took him the longest time to understand that bunnies are pretty quiet animals. In general, he explained that he thought all pets were loud. 3. My dad's lifelong best friend was born with hearing but lost it before age 2 due to health issues. He went his entire childhood deaf, and in his 20s finally got a hearing aid. At the time, he and his wife were living downtown in a large city. Apparently, he had the hearing aid for about 2 weeks before he threw it out, saying everything was too loud. He hated the noise and sound, saying things were more peaceful without it. 15 years later, he moved out into the country on a few hundred acres of woods. Still, he refused to wear a hearing aid and kept refusing for the next 10 years. Finally, his wife convinced him to give it a try, and his mind was blown. He couldn't believe how quiet everything was and how much he enjoyed hearing. He explained that he had thought the noise of the traffic downtown was the wind and that it sounded like that everywhere, all the time. So for 25 years, he thought wind sounded like the hundreds of cars driving by. 4. My 3-year-old son is deaf, and we just had a visit this morning from his signing teacher, who is also deaf herself. She recently had cochlear implants fitted. While we were talking and signing, she said, "I'm sorry, I can't concentrate. I can hear a horrible, constant noise. It hasn't stopped the whole time I've been here." It turned out it was the rain on my conservatory roof. 5. I had a childhood friend who gained hearing and didn't realize you could control the volume of your voice. When I whispered to her, she said, "Hang on, I think I need to adjust my hearing aid." At first, I just thought, "Oh, it must not be working," until I realized what was going on. She whispered to me for about 2 weeks straight, just to practice. High school teachers have read it. What is the one thing you want your students to know but would never tell them in person? 1. Your parents are literally the worst part of my job. 2. Yes, I put you in a group with the kids you have a crush on intentionally. I'm stuck here with you 180 days a year. I want to see some drama. 3. Stop wearing your furry tail. Everyone is uncomfortable. 4. I am no longer a teacher, but I remember several days I felt lazy and wanted to give the class the day off. I never did because I knew the teacher's pet would rat me out. Sometimes even the teachers don't like the teacher's pet. 5. The weed smell doesn't magically disappear between the parking lot and my classroom. 6. If your parents email a teacher and argue with them, the whole staff knows. 7. We have much better hearing than you assume. We just choose our battles when it comes to inappropriate comments. And sometimes I pretend not to see that thing you did because I found it humorous, and talking to you about it would only result in me cracking up. 8. If I know your name by the 3rd day of the school year, that means you're probably an asshole. 9. When you think you're being genius by getting me to talk about random things at the beginning of class instead of teaching, I'm really allowing it to happen because I don't have enough plan to cover a full class. 10. I'm a bus driver. Sit your butt down. You will die if I crash. 11. My students are the reason I'm second-guessing having my own kids. 12. Please stop drooling in the classrooms. That's what the bathrooms are for. 13. It's just as weird for me as it is for you when we bump into each other in public. 14. I don't care that you came to class stoned. Just stop interrupting class. And for God's sake, don't touch any power tools while you're stoned. 15. I knew you were cheating, so I gave you a test with the answers in a different order for the rest of the semester. You clearly weren't bright enough to figure it out. And yes, I am that spiteful. It was easier than reporting the cheating. 16. One day you're going to come across people who are not being paid to tolerate you, and all of a sudden, life is going to become considerably more difficult. 17. I encourage my worst kids as much or more than my favorites because I don't want them back in my class next year. 18. I can smell you. Everyone can. Please, for the love of God, use deodorant. What is the saddest thing you have heard a child say? 1. I was a doctor at an emergency room and received a child with 80% of his body burned in an alcohol accident. I knew he was going to die in a few days due to his injuries. When I talked to him, he was completely conscious. The only thing he was concerned about was going to his class on Monday because he couldn't miss it. Otherwise, his mother would lose the educational assistance money the government gave her. They were very poor. A few days later, before his death, the last thing he asked me was if there was yogurt in heaven. I cried for days. 2. In recent news, a man entered an electrified swimming pool to save his daughter and subsequently died from electrocution. His daughter survived. My 5-year-old son looked wide-eyed as I read the report to my wife. Silence overtook the room for a moment. Then, in a small, still voice, he said, "Daddy, would you die for me?" "Yes, of course." Tears welled up in his baby brown eyes. "I would die for you." Needless to say, I swept him into my arms and broke down. 3. I have a neighbor who shouts at his kids a lot. He has a close friend with a little girl, Mindy. Does this guy also shout at his kids? I don't know. The other day, my neighbor's son, Marco, and Mindy, both 6, rang my doorbell. Marco threw his monster ball on your balcony. "We want to get it, if you won't be angry." I said, "Of course I won't be angry. Come in." Mindy said, "Are you really not angry?" I said, "No." Mindy said, "When are you angry?" I said, "I'm never angry with kids." Mindy said, "Really?" I said, "Yes." Mindy said, "Never?" I said, "Never." Mindy said, "Not even if we do something wrong?" I said, "No. I'd probably tell you it was wrong, but I wouldn't be angry." Mindy looked at me and repeated, "You won't be angry with me?" I said, "I will never be angry with you." She looked at me for a few seconds, then flung herself into my arms. I didn't even know her before this. There's no saying exactly what her background is, but I found it profoundly sad. 4. Mom? Yeah? Daddy made me wake up last night. Yeah, he kissed me and said he loves me, and I woke up, and then he left. Oh. But I fell asleep again, so that's okay. Sunshine, of course, it's okay. He loves you more than anything else in the world. Now go brush your teeth. Time for school. That was the last kiss my child ever got from his dad. Later that same night, this loving dad committed suicide. It had been a goodbye kiss. We didn't know it until that day. 5. Don't cry, Ma. I know, and I am ready. These were the words spoken by a 5-year-old girl under my care when I worked in a pediatric oncology ward a few years ago. She was a beta thalassemia major patient, a real cutie. I can still remember her curly hair, friendly smiles, and how talkative she was on her good days. She had undergone 2 bone marrow transplants in the past but came back with recurrent complications from the procedures. We tried our best, but she was dying, and she knew it. We were on the verge of tears during our morning review that day and heard her comforting her parents. She passed away peacefully in her sleep after weeks of fighting. May you rest in peace, baby girl. 6. We received a 7-year-old girl for what was to be one day. The plan was for her to appear in court the next day to give testimony about what her mother's boyfriend had done to her. The expectation was that she would then be returned to her mother, with the boyfriend out on his ear. When she returned, she told me she had to live with me because her mother loved the boyfriend more and wouldn't kick him out of their house. Since the living arrangements with the father were complicated, she couldn't go there yet, so she had to be with strangers. She asked me if I knew why her mother would do such a thing. I struggled to give her some answer without disparaging her mother, as that can hurt a child. I said, even grown-ups get confused about what's important. She cried on my shoulder until she was exhausted. Why indeed? Was all I could think. We managed well, and in 6 months, she was returned to her father. By that time, we discovered she didn't need classes for children with developmental disabilities, she could learn well, and she was emotionally stable. Her life got significantly better, but the scar from her mother's rejection stayed for a long time. 7. I was at the park with my 2 sons one day. They were around 5 and 6. I can remember giving them snacks and cheering for them when they showed me one of their look what I can do moves. Nothing fancy or over the top, just a regular day at the park. A little boy around the same age as my children walked up to me and asked, "Why are you so nice to them?" I responded, "Because those are my kids, and I love them." He said, "Are you always that nice to them?" I replied, "Yes, I'm their mom." He then looked incredibly sad, gave me a hug, and ran off. I pray for him all the time. What do men think women like, but they really don't? 1. Literally ramming your fingers in and out of me. Just know, please know. It's almost always going to hurt. The come here motion on the other hand. 2. My ex seemed to think I was interested in hearing about how he got down with women before me. No, thanks, dude. 3. Showing off, flexing, or comparing yourself to others in order to brag. Some guys think it makes them look cool, but it just makes them look insecure. 4. Having massive junk. At a certain point it just hurts and feels annoying. 5. Being a nice guy. Women want a guy who is nice, not a disciplined pet who does whatever they say. 6. Driving stupidly with me in the car to try and show off. It's an absolute no for me. 7. Obnoxiously loud vehicles. You think you're impressing them, but look closer at their faces. 9 times out of 10, that's a sneer, not a smile. 8. Tough guy behavior. Like starting fights in public over shit that's not worth a fight. You don't look big and bad, just embarrassing. 9. So many men consider not having basic hygiene a flex or something masculine. Dude, you'll never find a woman who's into this. Please look after yourself. 10. Anyone who claims to be an alpha. It's the dumbest shit I've ever heard. Genuine, gentle, sweetheart guys are 1,000 times more attractive. What actor or actress stupidly left a movie franchise or TV series thinking they were too good for it only to be never popular again? 1. Terrence Howard, Iron Man series. Terrence Howard played Rhodey in Iron Man 1 and was set to become War Machine, marking the start of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU. However, he was reportedly dropped for asking for a huge pay increase. Don Cheadle replaced him in Iron Man 2 and all subsequent MCU films. 2. Sean Connery, The Lord of the Rings. This isn't exactly what you asked, but Sean Connery turned down the role of Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, despite being offered $30 million plus 15% of the film's profits, which would have earned him around $450 million. He declined because he didn't understand the script. Ironically, the next time he was offered a script he didn't understand, it was for The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. He took it, ended up disappointed in the film, and subsequently retired from acting. 3. Stuart Townsend, The Lord of the Rings. Stuart Townsend was originally cast as Aragorn in the Lord of the Rings films. However, during pre-production and rehearsals, he refused to practice essential skills like sword fighting, horseback riding, and action choreography, often saying, "You'll get it on the day." Peter Jackson decided he couldn't work with him, so he was replaced by Viggo Mortensen, literally on the first day of shooting. The rest is history. 4. Soap opera star who overplayed her hand. My ex-girlfriend was a regular extra on a soap opera and was starting to get small speaking roles. She even got her Screen Actors Guild, SAG, card. Afterward, she demanded more speaking roles or threatened to leave the show. She never got another acting role again. 5. Lacey Chabert, Family Guy. Lacey Chabert originally voiced Meg Griffin on Family Guy but left the show, reportedly due to scheduling conflicts. She was replaced by Mila Kunis, who has since made a fortune from the show's new episodes and syndication. 6. Leonardo DiCaprio, Titanic. Leo DiCaprio almost lost the role of Jack Dawson in Titanic because he refused to read for parts. Director James Cameron reportedly said, "Okay, thanks for coming in." DiCaprio, surprised, asked, "Wait, if I don't read, I don't get the part?" Cameron explained that he'd be working on the film in post-production for years and didn't want to risk casting the wrong actor just because they were popular. DiCaprio humbled himself and did a screen test with Kate Winslet. Although this isn't exactly what you asked, it's interesting how Leo's career could have been derailed if he hadn't agreed to the read. 7. Actors from MASH who left early. Several actors from MASH left the show early, hoping to make it big in Hollywood. Unfortunately, none of them really succeeded after leaving the series. What's something that sucks about being a man? 1. The other day, a female friend suggested we hang out. I said, sure. She said she was hungry and knew a restaurant nearby, so we went there. We walked in, and she said, "Table for 2. We sat down, and she ordered a sandwich. I wasn't hungry, so I didn't order anything. After ordering her sandwich, she asked for the dessert menu and ordered a molten lava cake. I didn't have a single bite. Then she called the waiter over and asked for the check. He came back 30 seconds later and handed the check to me. Let me repeat that. My female friend suggested we go out to eat. She was the only person talking to the waitstaff. I just said, thank you a few times. She was the only person who ordered and ate, and she was the person who asked for the check. And yet, the waiter still handed the check to me. Always being expected to pay is definitely something that sucks about being a man, especially when you didn't eat anything. 2. Window seat on a plane. I was traveling with my wife on an Airbus A320. My wife asked, what are our seat numbers? I said, it's 27E and 27F. She said, then the window seat is mine. I said, but why always? I want to enjoy the view too. She argued. I argued. She cried. Finally, she won the seat, by what I call the Duckworth-Lewis method. This totally sucks. 3. My wife had a 6-month affair. When I found out, I left her. A number of people assumed I was the one who cheated on her, which bothered me. I corrected them. Worse were all the people who assumed I must have done something wrong to deserve it, that I was still the bad guy. People told me I must have not paid enough attention to her or that I somehow drove her to it. Some refused to believe I didn't do something wrong to cause her to cheat. All I can say is that I loved her and treated her like a queen. When I've asked her why she did it, her response has always been that I was a terrific husband, that she loved me, and that she regrets it. The guy was nearly 20 years younger than her. He was in his early 20s, she was nearly 40. He was attractive and charming, and she found him irresistible. So that's a double standard I've lived through and find unfair. If I had cheated, I'd have been labeled a creep or a jerk. When she has an affair, I'm still somehow the jerk. Who's to blame? 4. My daughter Sophia is 11, 4 feet 9 inches, and 80 pounds. I'm 5 feet 11 inches and 190 pounds. She takes Kempo karate and wanted to show me the snap kick she was perfecting. When I raised my hand and encouraged her to give me her best shot, Sophia delivered a vicious kick that whiffed on my hand and caught me full in the groin, dropping me like a sack of rocks. Daddy, I'm so sorry, she exclaimed, hovering over me as I lay face down on the floor, gasping for air with tears in my eyes. No, sweetie, Daddy's fine. He's never been prouder. Unfortunately for us guys, even Mighty Thor would drop to his knees if Sophia kicked him in the hammer. 5. I was walking in the park when I saw a little girl, about 4 years old, crying her eyes out next to the playground. There were no adults around, just her, sobbing her little heart out. All I wanted to do was go up, lower myself to her level, give her a little hug, and ask where her mommy and daddy were. But I couldn't. Modern society says that a man on his own near a park talking to children is a threat, so I had to keep my distance until I got the attention of a woman walking her dog. Society is broken when a man feels he can't even comfort a crying child. I understand it, but it truly sucks. 6. I have several female friends who worked hard in school and then got prestigious jobs. But prestigious jobs often come with long hours and tough work. They made fairly good money, but after a long, frustrating day at work, they would sometimes joke, I need to find a rich husband so I can be a housewife. And some of them did. One of them moved to another country where traditional gender roles are more prevalent, and she found herself a really rich husband. Then a few of the other girls moved too. And I kid you not, they also found rich husbands. I've met a lot of women who've jumped up the socioeconomic ladder through marriage, but guys? I haven't met a single one. Generally speaking, women still expect men to make at least as much as they do. So what sucks about being a guy? The immense pressure to be financially successful. As much as we try to deny it, society is obsessed with financial status and will measure a man's worth based on his wealth. 7. I was traveling by bus to a destination and was sitting alone in a seat meant for 2 people, on the window side. The scenery was beautiful, and I was lost in the view, enjoying the beauty of nature. The bus stopped, and a lady, who looked to be over 60, boarded. There were 2 empty seats, one next to me and one behind me, where a man was sitting in the window seat, also enjoying the scenery. The lady stood beside me, thought for a while, and then asked me to switch seats with the man behind me. I was confused. Why couldn't she sit beside me or him? Are we going to eat you? Why kill our enjoyment? But she was adamant and started creating a scene. I had to get up and sit beside the man. He sensed my reaction and kindly offered me the window seat, but I thanked him and chose to sit in the L seat. What an unnecessary sacrifice. You have to kneel before fake feminism. That sucks about being a man sometimes. What did your mother say that made your jaw drop? 1. My first year of college, chemistry was kicking my butt. I came home for the weekend, pulling my hair out. Mom asked, "Can I help you?" I said, "What do you know about chemistry?" Not in a snotty way, just a perplexed way. Dad laughed and said, "She's a nurse." For the next hour, she taught me better than my professor. She blew my mind by making me see her as a person and not just mom. 2. My high school friend decided to calculate the date of her conception. Exactly 9 months before her birthday was Easter Sunday. After school, she went home and confronted her mom. "Mom, did you and Dad conceive me on Easter?" Her mom casually turned her head and said, "Wouldn't doubt it." Her daughter was slightly horrified. "So on the holy day we celebrate Jesus coming back, you and Dad decided to get it on. That's nasty, Mom." Her mom gave a smirk and said, "Yeah, he rose again," and laughed as she walked off. 3. Your dad and I remade our wills. If I die first, I've left everything in the house to you. I was confused and asked her, "Just what you mean by everything in the house?" So she recited the list, all the furniture, all the artwork, her crystal, china, silverware, collectibles, books, porcelain, lamps, jewelry, clothing, Christmas decorations, fine linens, basically everything in the house. I was dumbfounded and also more than a little queasy. Mom, I would never come in and strip the house. I would never do that to Dad. Why would you write your will that way? She explained that she had seen cases where the wife died first, left everything to her husband, and then the husband remarried without updating his will. The second wife got everything, and the children never received any of their late mother's possessions. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "I know your father. If I die first, he will remarry. He just wouldn't be able to live on his own. And I'll be darned if some other woman is going to walk in and treat my items as her own." My mom worked, bought quality, and wasn't about to see someone else waltz off with her stuff. 4. When I was growing up, my dad had an affair that went on for years. He was in and out of our lives. My mom finally moved me and my sister back to New York without my dad, and we resumed our lives. During that time, my dad cleaned up, found God, left his mistress, and won my mom back. They're still married to this day. My dad tells this story about when he was trying to win my mom back. He noticed she was wearing a new watch, and he suspected it was from a certain gentleman at her work. She didn't answer, so he knew it was from that man. He said he was so mad and so jealous, and to this day, he still gets jealous. I realized the irony of a man who had a years-long affair getting jealous. So one night my dad was telling us about it again, and then he left the room. My mom, my sweet, quiet, hard-working mother, who stood by my dad all those years, never raised her voice, and was a pillar of strength, looked at us and said, "I found that watch on the floor at my job and kept it." I enjoyed letting him think it was from a man. My jaw dropped. Then I laughed my ass off and was so proud of her. To this day, my dad still doesn't know the truth. 5. My mother lived in a time when women kept their place. She took care of the house and family and rarely expressed an opinion. As a result, I'm sorry to say that we all took her for granted. One day, when my sister and I were teens, the three of us were listening to a Collins song request show on the radio. My sister started to change the station, but my mother said, "Don't change the station." My sister and I stared at each other. It was so out of character for my mother to speak up like that. We were shocked but were used to following orders, so my sister left the station as it was. A few awkward moments followed because we weren't used to her having an opinion. Then suddenly our names were called out over the radio, announcing a song to be played for us. My mother had called in and requested a song. That's why she didn't want us to change the station. I began to see what my mother's life must have been like, to never speak up, never voice an opinion, and to have people shocked when you make a simple request. I looked at my mother with new eyes that day, and I gained a new respect for her and all she did for us. 6. I was on Tinder, shortlisting girls, swiping right, so my father kept asking me to do some chores. I tried to dodge, but my father asked my mother, "What's his problem?" My mom replied, "Just a few more seconds, and then he's free for 12 hours, once Tinder exhausts his right swipes." 7. Normal, healthy teenage girls do not do this kind of thing. You're a sexual deviant. I was 15 years old and had been caught looking at, well, let's just say less than SFW things. I couldn't do anything but gape as my sweet, accepting, loving mother, who had always told me I could come to her with anything, called me disgusting and messed up for even thinking about those things. She dragged me to my therapist the next day, threw herself down on the couch with me, much to the therapist's surprise, and began to describe how wounded, betrayed, and disgusted she was with me. Thankfully, my therapist was having none of it and kicked my mom out of the office, assuring me that I wasn't damaged, messed up, or deviant in any way. I was a normal teenager. I don't think my mom ever forgave my therapist for that, but I completely stopped talking to her about everything that day. She still asks me sometimes why I'm so distant, but I don't answer because I know she would pitch a fit if she knew that she was the first person, though certainly not the last, to bully me for anything having to do with my sexuality. 8. My parents were happily married for nearly 45 years. Less than 2 years after my dad passed away, my mom started dating several men. One day, she announced that she planned to marry a man she'd never mentioned before. She said that was because she'd only met him 2 weeks prior. When I tried to talk her into postponing the wedding until she had more time to get to know him, she responded, "I only had 2 dates with your father before I married him." My jaw dropped. She did marry the guy, and they were happy until he passed away 15 years later. Both men loved her dearly and treated her well. Very lucky lady. Did you ever go to the hospital in an emergency and get admitted immediately? 1. Yes, I was at home when I coughed and suddenly felt intense pain. I initially thought it was another broken rib, as I regularly broke ribs when I coughed. But within about 10 minutes, I couldn't sit, stand, or even breathe without gasping. My son took one look at me and rushed me to the hospital ER. While he was parking the car, I staggered into the waiting room. The triage nurse took one look at me, ignored everyone else, grabbed a wheelchair, and shouted, "Code Blue! Code Blue!" She literally pushed people out of the way while yelling for assistance. We rushed into the ER, where the nurses immediately sprang into action. A patient in a hospital bed was wheeled out to make room for me. I kept apologizing to him, but within moments, I was surrounded by doctors, nurses, an ECG machine, and someone drawing blood. By the time my son returned from parking, I was already undergoing multiple CT scans. It turned out that when I coughed, I had burst a blood clot in my lung, causing internal bleeding. Fortunately, the clot didn't travel to my brain, or I would have died instantly. In the span of just 10 minutes, I was diagnosed and treated for multiple blood clots in my lung. I am forever grateful to my son, the medical staff, and God for saving my life that day. 2. At 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday, my alarm went off. I hit snooze and got ready for the day, but I felt more nauseous than ever before. I tried to throw up and sit down but couldn't find any relief. I managed to make it to work, but I couldn't drink coffee, and even Coke didn't help. By Wednesday, I briefly passed out and hit my head on the way down. My husband was very worried, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just an upset stomach. By Friday, I was still extremely nauseous, so I finally called my husband to pick me up from work. My boss escorted me outside, and people offered support. On the way to the hospital, I dreaded having to wait in the ER. As we walked in, a triage nurse rushed over and got me a wheelchair immediately. Within the hour, I had an X-ray, a CT scan, and blood tests. It turned out I had a bleeding ulcer and had lost 3 pints of blood. I guess I looked pretty pale. Thankfully, they treated me quickly, and I was admitted right away. 3. I walked into the ER, and since I was a chief of surgery, an orthopedic surgeon, they asked who I was there to see. I told them I wasn't there to see anyone, I was the patient. I said, "I have appendicitis." Naturally, they didn't believe me and performed a CT scan, which came back negative. They asked who they should call, and I gave them the names of 2 general surgeons. One of them arrived within 30 minutes. Another half hour later, I was in the OR, receiving anesthesia stronger than fentanyl. My friend, the surgeon, removed my severely infected appendix. I was up and rounding within 4 pole the next day. Rest in peace to my friend, who was a brilliant but troubled surgeon. I miss him. 4. I was bitten by a cat, but my boyfriend insisted it would be fine. I rinsed the wounds and carried on. Within 24 hours, my hand was swollen to twice its size, red and painful. Reluctantly, my boyfriend drove me to the ER, but he complained that it wasn't convenient for him and asked if I could wait until the next morning. When I got to the ER, I was hooked up to N4 within half an hour. The doctor told me that if I had waited any longer, I might have died from sepsis. Needless to say, I dumped my boyfriend shortly after. 5. Last weekend, I ate lunch at a fast food chain before starting a 3.5-hour drive home. About 45 minutes into the drive, my stomach started rumbling intensely. I had to pull over multiple times to vomit or have diarrhea. This went on every 10 minutes for the next 70 miles. I realized I wouldn't make it home, so I followed signs to the nearest hospital. I walked into the ER, handed over my insurance card, and barely managed to say, "I think I have food poisoning," before vomiting on the floor and passing out. When I came to, I was already in a hospital gown with 4 fluids being administered. They did numerous tests, including an EKG, and kept me for 24 hours to ensure I could hold down food and liquids. I'm grateful for the quick care I received at Community Regional Hospital in Kokomo, Indiana. 6. One winter, I woke up with chest pains. I ignored it and got on a short 2-hour flight. The pain worsened, so I asked the flight attendant when we would land. It was only 15 minutes away. My wife picked me up at the airport, and we skipped the checked bags, heading straight to the ER. Chest pains meant they saw me immediately. An ECG ruled out a heart attack, but the pain was still severe. One of the orderlies jokingly asked if I had been playing baseball, as it sounded like a ball-throwing injury. That's when I remembered the drunken snowball fight I had the night before. It turned out I had pulled chest muscles. The relief mitigated the embarrassment. 7. I woke up at 2 a.m. with severe back pain. Changing positions didn't help, so I went downstairs to avoid waking my husband. I drank a glass of milk, but it immediately made me vomit. I kept throwing up, and eventually, my husband came downstairs, alarmed. I told him to call an ambulance because I knew something was seriously wrong. 15 minutes later, I was in the ambulance, still vomiting bile. The paramedic thought it was just the flu, but I knew better. Within 15 minutes of arriving at the hospital, I was being wheeled into the OR. My gallbladder had ruptured, and I spent 5 days in the hospital recovering. What trend died so fast that you can hardly call it a trend? 1. Silly bands. I worked in retail at the time. After they initially sold out, by the time we got new stock in, nobody wanted them anymore. They all got clearanced out, probably because schools banned them almost immediately. 2. The sea shanty craze. Remember that one random week when everyone was suddenly into sea shanties for some reason? 3. Segways, does the existence of the Segway count as a trend? It was hyped as the future of transportation, but it never really caught on. 4. The 3D craze. Around 2010, everyone thought 3D was the future. After Avatar came out, every movie tried to be 3D. Then came 3D TVs, 3D phones, and the Nintendo 3DS. The craze died out in about a year, likely because it gave people headaches and was more of a gimmick than an improvement. 5. The summer of Pokemon Go. The summer of Pokemon Go was incredible. People were up and outside, walking around, getting exercise. Strangers met and chatted, and for a brief moment, it was cool to be social. Then, if I remember correctly, an app update broke the game, and its popularity dropped off drastically. Ironically, about 4 years later, COVID-19 happened, and we were all stuck indoors, a complete opposite of that one wonderful summer of Pokemon Go. Which celebrity faded away without many realizing it? 1. I heard someone say, if you wonder why an actress stopped working, the answer is probably Harvey Weinstein. It's really sad. I see Sopranos fans asking why the actress who played Gloria Trillo didn't do much else. The big answer is that Harvey Weinstein blocked her career from advancing because she turned down his advances. 2. Kevin Spacey. You never see him in anything anymore. I really loved him in House of Cards and American Beauty. 3. Taylor Lautner was huge during the Twilight era. He had fans screaming over Team Jacob and seemed set for a major career after that. But when Twilight ended, he started appearing in fewer projects, and it's like he faded out as quickly as he shot to fame. Now you barely hear anything about him, and it's wild considering how massive he was for those few years. 4. LMFAO released Party Rock Anthem, then Sorry for Party Rocking, and then vanished off the face of the earth. 5. If you had told me 20 years ago that the most relevant Olsen sister would be Elizabeth, I'd have been very confused. But here we are. The other two are a nonentity, and she's part of the biggest film franchise of our generation. 6. Wiz Khalifa. I never really listened to him, but Black and Yellow was on a loop all through high school. After I graduated, I never heard anything about him again. 7. Ellen DeGeneres was known for her Be Kind brand, but then stories emerged about toxic work environments and how poorly people were treated on her show. Former employees and even celebrity guests spoke out. While her show continued for a bit, her reputation was severely damaged. It's crazy how she went from America's beloved talk show host to someone people view as hypocritical. 8. Chrissy Teigen was known as the queen of Twitter and was beloved for her witty social media presence. But then past tweets and messages resurfaced showing her bullying behavior, and she faced massive backlash. Brands dropped her, and she took a long break from social media. Her reputation hasn't fully bounced back, and it's wild how fast things turned for her. 9. Louis C.K. was one of the biggest comedians around until allegations of inappropriate behavior came out. He admitted to it, but his career took a major hit with networks and streaming services dropping his shows and projects. He's tried to make a comeback, but it's clear he'll never have the same mainstream acceptance he once did. When did you first realize your child was different? 1. A few years ago, around 2008 or 2009, I was sitting in the living room, panicking because the router was acting up, and I still had 2 hours left in my shift. After repeatedly trying to fix it, I gave up and went into the kitchen to start dinner, feeling completely defeated. About 30 minutes later, I walked back into the living room and saw my 9-year-old son, Colby, putting the lid back on the router and plugging it in. I was stunned. My 15-year-old said, "Mom, come and see this," and showed me a video of Colby taking the router apart piece by piece, down to the switchboard, and putting it back together perfectly. I looked over at Colby, who was leaning against the wall, sucking his thumb, and giving me the biggest smile I've ever seen. I knew then that my baby was a genius. He could take apart any device, fix it, and reassemble it. Sadly, Colby was taken from me on January 22, 2020, by criminals who thought his life was worth less than $30. They robbed and killed him. The world lost a beautiful mind and a loving soul. He will always shine in my heart for the rest of my life. I love and miss you so much, Colby T. Peterson. 2. I was picking up my 4-year-old from preschool. The teacher called me over with a whisper, and I thought, oh no. We walked into the classroom as she explained something about playing with clay during reading time. I was bracing myself for bad news when we reached the table where my daughter was sitting alone. Before I could ask what was wrong, the teacher pointed to a clay sculpture of scissors, open and precisely detailed with a screw head and tapered blades. The only thing that gave it away as not real was the color. The teacher, in awe, said, "Your daughter made this from memory." I told her, "She always does that. Is it okay? She loves clay." The teacher shook her head and said, "In all my years, I've never seen anything like this, let alone from a 4-year-old. 30 years later, she's an artist, to no one's surprise. 3. When my daughter was 4, we were coloring together, each with our own coloring book. Until that day, she had colored as most kids do, making casual crayon strokes with no regard for the lines. Suddenly, she stopped and stared at my work. I continued chatting and coloring but noticed her intense gaze. After about a minute, I asked if something was wrong. Without a word, she flipped the page in her coloring book and started a new picture. From that day on, she strove never to color outside the lines. No one told her to, she simply decided. By 2nd grade, her artwork on the classroom wall stood out from the others. By 4th grade, she could copy other artwork so faithfully that it closely resembled the original. Her original pieces showed an understanding of line and perspective. Now, at almost 12, she has far surpassed my skills, not a high bar, admittedly, and is well on her way to becoming something special. Her Christmases and birthdays are filled with art supplies that she turns into incredible creations. 4. My son was 11 months old. One Sunday, after visiting friends, we stopped for pizza. Our friends had given us some toys their kids had outgrown, including farm animals and buildings. I sat my son on the kitchen floor with the toys, hoping to get 5 minutes to eat a slice of pizza before he got bored. I kept glancing at him as he played, rearranging the toys. I knew an 11-month-old shouldn't have an attention span of more than a few minutes, but this went on for nearly half an hour. I realized then that he had a superior intellect, a fact he has continued to prove ever since. 5. I first suspected something the day after my son was born. He was alert and looking around. Yes, I know newborns can't focus their eyes, but it felt like he was staring through me. At 2 weeks, he was holding his head up to get a better view. At 6 months, during church service, he saw me on the platform and mouthed, "Hi, Pop," as clearly as day. Even the pastor noticed and whispered, "He said hi, Pop." At 9 months, he started walking, or rather, running, and hasn't slowed down since. Now grown, he has ADHD, which made it hard to focus on boring tasks like studying. Though he didn't finish college, he's a truck driver and an exceptional jack of all trades. He juggles, makes glass marbles, yo-yos competitively, rebuilds car engines, sews costumes, and even roasts and grinds his own coffee. Best of all, he's still my sweet, tender-hearted boy. 6. 63 minutes after my daughter was born, my husband spoke to her from across the room as the doctor was fixing me up. She lifted her head off the bassinet and looked for him. The nurse laughed and called her a daddy's girl. She did the same thing the next day when my mom was holding her. When her daddy spoke, her head popped right up, and she focused on him. At 3 months, she said her first word, "Daddy," with perfect clarity. By her first birthday, she was speaking in full sentences. By 3, she had taught herself to read. For her 5th birthday, she asked for a dictionary, then sat in the middle of her party reading it aloud. By 1st grade, her reading level tested at 8th grade. By 3rd grade, she was reading at a college level. Now 14, she's a straight A student, reads 1,000-page books in hours, and is adored by classmates and teachers. She's still very much a daddy's girl but claims I'm her favorite person. Every child is different, with their own strengths and challenges. I have 3 kids, and they are all equally loved. 7. I was called into a meeting with a preschool principal about my son. Nervously, I asked, "What happened?" The principal replied, "We need to talk about your son in blocks." "Oh my God, did he hit someone?" "I'm so sorry." "Did he hurt them?" I asked. No, nothing like that. He built a cat." I let that sink in. "Oh, you didn't like that?" "He builds good houses too, though sometimes he forgets the door," I offered. They brought another child to demonstrate block stacking. That child barely managed to balance 3 blocks. Finally, they dropped the politeness and said, "The other child is normal. Your child is the different one." What's the dumbest thing you've ever seen tattooed on someone? 1. My dad tattooed his high school girlfriend's name on his arm and covered it up with a naked woman when they split. 2. I've got 2. Both were while working in surgery. First woman apologized for her tattoos before going under anesthesia. She's asleep, we get her positioned, it was a vaginal procedure, and right on top of her mons pubis was "Eat Fresh." And yes, it was even in the Subway font. Second, woman had lost a bunch of weight and was getting a tummy tuck. She had this weird tattoo of a shitty little cartoon cowboy on her lower abdomen/hip. By the time the surgeon had cut off all the excess skin and sewed her back up, all that was left was the hat. 3. Chick I know debated between her own name and her kid's name on her forearm. She chose her own name. 4. A couple of guys I knew at basic training got your name tattooed on their butt cheeks so that they could go up to random people and say, "Hey, I got your name tattooed on my ass," then pull down their pants. 5. My ex's family all went to Thailand for a family holiday and decided to get matching tattoos. They asked for the word family in Thai. They were all so excited until they got back and a Thai friend of mine explained to them that it says handbag. 6. When I worked at electronics boutique back in the 90s, there was this one redneck lady who would come in like once a month with a different redneck bow. And on her left arm she had tattooed the names dudes with the previous one crossed out, and yep, each time she came in with a new dude there was a new name. 7. A man got a food company's logo tattooed on his forehead for a cash prize, only to find out it was an April Fool's Day prank. 8. My friend got a whiskey bottle on his thigh and then decided to stop drinking. He also has never really liked whiskey. 9. Thug life on a guy's toes. 10. It's not dumb, but it's silly. A friend has a gluten and dairy intolerance, and they have an angry slice of bread and an angry milk carton on them. What is the most vulgar thing you've ever heard someone say? 1. I used to work with a hilarious old waitress that had a foul mouth. She once kicked open the door to the staff room and announced she'd just lost 5 pounds. Another staff took the bait and asked if she'd just taken a fat shit, to which she replied, "Nah man, I just trimmed my bush." 2. I heard a woman say, "You gotta be fist fucking me right now," in a professional setting. 3. I used to work as a bill collector. I was talking to a guy one afternoon and he told me, "You take that bill and shove it right down your cum-guzzling throat." Stopped me dead in my tracks, and after a brief pause I just started laughing. Then he started laughing. Says to me, that was a good one, wasn't it? And I respond, yeah, it really was. Then he hung up on me. 4. One of my fave insults I ever heard as a bartender was someone say you only exist cause your mom's tits weren't nice enough to finish on. 5. I worked with a Scottish girl who had some really good ones. My favorite was how she would describe being horny as frothing at the gash. 6. Dirtier than fingering your sister and finding your dad's wedding ring. 7. My favorite fast food is KFC because I eat it then I jack off with the grease on my hands, which gives me these little pimples all over my dick that I can pop the next day and still taste the chicken. Heard in a Counter-Strike source lobby about 15 years ago and it still haunts me. Americans, what shocks you about the UK? 1. The casual use of the word cunt. In America, cunt is way worse. It's the kind of thing you call someone when you have little to no intention of speaking to them again. 2. I've never been, but I was shocked and concerned for the Englishmen I met at the Euro Cup final. They weren't fat like our fatties, but just looked so incredibly unhealthy. They look like they drink 20 beers a day and 2 packs of cigarettes in the same beat. 3. How the average Londoner can afford regular pub nights considering UK salaries and the cost of pints. 4. Lack of air conditioning. There was something gross about being stuck in hotel rooms during the summer with no AC and windows that wouldn't open more than a few inches. It was just crushing to walk into any given business and instead of that expected blast of refreshing, cool, dry air that you get everywhere in the US, you just get the exact same temperature you were just in outside and, sometimes, even worse. 5. A lot of the Brits I know talk about how violent American culture is, but in living in the UK for 4 years I saw more fistfights than I have in 5 decades in the US. In the US, if you punch a guy in the face it's a major crime that you could do serious time for. In the UK it's a Tuesday night at the pub. 6. When I visited Scotland for the first time, I noticed a newspaper lying about. The original headline said, "It all legless woman uses leg prosthetics to attack cabin crew." At that moment, I was certain that I was in the United Kingdom. 7. How many people own a washer but no dryer for their cloths? 8. People are so mean to each other. I know it's a different culture and not meant the same way. It's not as though every person is actually a jerk, but as an American, it just feels like such a mean-spirited culture. 9. How little artificial flavorings and artificial sugars there are in food. 10. How much cheaper alcohol is there? Was not expecting it when I went over there a couple years ago, but I certainly wasn't complaining. Also thought that driving on the other side of the car and road would be more challenging than it was. Honestly, the only bad part was how narrow some of the roads are. What is something that someone has walked in on you doing? 1. In high school I was in a guy's bed trying to figure out how to make my exit without his mom seeing me, considering how obvious it was that it was a casual thing. Then she walked into his room, asked him to pick up his little sister from school, and gave me a casual wave. That's when I realized I was one of many. 2. My girlfriend's little, 10, sister walked in on us doing the dirty. I immediately went soft and my girlfriend screamed. I made eye contact with the poor girl as she slowly closed the door. Never talked to her about it. 3. I forgot to lock our sweet mate's door to our shared bathroom, and his girlfriend walked in on me taking a heinous shit. I was in college, and I'm talking Keystone Light Tall Boys and Taco Bell type shit. 4. My dad walked in on me using a vibrating face brush. It was like a cheap version of the Clarisonic, as a vibrator. I was home alone and thought I was okay because the alarm goes off when the garage door opens and my family always used the garage door. Except that day. He didn't walk into my room, but he could see the very obvious position I was in, legs spread, holding a noise-making thing in my vagina. I quickly switched devices to my epilator that makes a kind of similar sound and tried to make it look like I was grooming my bikini area, but the damage was done. 5. I had had a surgery and could not stay at my apartment by myself, so I opted to stay at my grandparents' house. My friend with benefits came over and was in the middle of giving me a sympathy BJ when my grandmother walked her happy self right into the bedroom. We never talked about it, which is a good thing. What's something you find attractive that isn't the normal? 1. I love it when a girl is wearing a tank top and a bra underneath and it's just a bunch of straps. 2. Sharp canine teeth. It just gets me going for no reason. 3. My GF told me she finds the back ligament of my feet extremely hot and I don't know what to do with that information. 4. Wizard cloaks. 5. Just the way a girl looks when she wakes up in the morning. 6. I like protruding ears. 7. Very strong opinions about macroeconomics of the developing world. 8. Women who read before sleep. For some reason I found it comforting watching someone reading while I'm half asleep. 9. I'm a 7 on a good day and a 5 on others. My wife thinks I'm a 10 because I can make her laugh on her worst days and I've got mad skills in the kitchen. She gives me looking at a Greek god eyes if I'm making her laugh while prepping appetizers after a hard day at work. Somewhere along the way I forget I was average looking, because the way she looks at me makes me believe I'm loved for exactly who I am. 10. Short guys. I'm 5'9" and my husband is 5'6". 11. I find it attractive when girls have big front teeth and a basically a cute rabbit face. 12. Women in full suits of armor. I will not elaborate. 13. Stretch marks. Like starting on the side of the lower cheek going to upper thigh. Especially if you're naturally tan cause the stretch marks are a lot lighter than the skin. I should call her. 14. I actually prefer a more normal look for a girl to a hot date look. Think sweatshirt/pants versus dress. I suppose it just feels like they are more comfortable with me, and that's what I want out of a relationship. 15. I love a big nose on a woman. Especially a Roman nose. 16. Some scars are hot. 17. I've noticed most of the girls I find attractive have big foreheads. Or like most of their facial features are in the bottom 2/3 of their face. I'm not sure why. I wonder if part of me thinks that small forehead people have little brains or something, but I couldn't tell you. It's just something I've noticed that I'm drawn to over the years. I just want to give them a big ol' kiss on their forehead. What's something that's not right about your body, but not serious enough to go to a doctor about? 1. Sometimes I'll have one random hair that grows out of my arm that has the consistency of plastic and is almost clear looking. My mom gets it too. It's just one hair. 2. My left leg makes cracking sounds when I walk upstairs. I'm only 20 years old, guys. 3. There's an indent on my right foot where a horse stepped on it. I never went to a doctor about it and I assume it is in fact broken, but it's been almost 20 years. 4. You know that little flap anchoring your tongue to the bottom of your mouth? Mine's abnormally short, so I can't stick my tongue out as far as the average person. 5. I experienced something that's called exploding head syndrome, something that is much less severe than the name might imply. Basically, sometimes, right as I'm on the edge of sleep, I'll hear a loud auditory hallucination that jolts me back awake. 6. When I blow my nose, my left eye bubbles from the corner. Like air coming through? Freaks me out every time because it feels so weird. 7. The texture of the skin on my right palm changed after I was sick back in March. Sometimes it's bubbly and really itchy, sometimes it looks just really tight and glossy, and sometimes it's so dry that the skin is cracking up. I can definitely see a difference between the right and the left one. The little roads on my right palm aren't as visible anymore. 8. I used to have a hedgehog named Velcro. I'd let him run around on my bed. One morning I slid out of bed and got a sharp pain in my left booty cheek. I walked to the bathroom and saw that I had a half-inch of quill lodged firmly in my haunch. I pulled out what I could and thought I got it all. It wept a few times and eventually healed. It'd been 20 years, and I still have a scab on my butt that falls off once a month, and comes back in a few days. I can feel there's something deep under the skin, but because of the bad angle, there's no way I can take care of it without a dermatologist's help. 9. I have a singular, white eyelash on one of my eyes that grows really quickly and gets so long it'll get in my actual eye, and I need to cut it every couple of months to keep it short. 10. My collarbone is always sore. To the point that it keeps me up at night. I guess I technically did go to a doctor. I went right after it started hurting and they accused me of drug seeking. That was a year and a half ago. I'll just live with it. 11. I throw up after I eat eggs. I really like eggs though. 12. I'm a little obese, and I know how to fix this myself. What creatures went extinct that we should thank God don't exist anymore? 1. Tigers have white spots on the back of their ears to fool predators. Whatever creature that was, I'm glad that it's no longer around. 2. Can we all just take a moment to appreciate that megalodons are no longer roaming the seas? Swimming just got a whole lot less terrifying. 3. What was that one alligator/crocodile thing that had long legs and could freaking gallop on land like a horse? Yeah, that guy is a hard pass for me. 4. Saber-toothed cats. I'm glad I don't have to worry about those cats while walking. 5. The Arthropleura. Imagine a millipede the size of a car slithering around. That's a hard no for me. 6. Giant sloths. Actual monsters that ancient humans had to fight. 7. Literally anything alive during the Carboniferous period. 8. Terror birds. A cassowary is probably the closest living animal and it could still F you up. 9. Short-faced bear. Those effers stood at 13 feet tall. I stood next to a model of one once and couldn't even really register how a predatory mammal could be so big. They weren't chunky like brown bears, they are muscular and lean, which makes me think they would be able to maneuver much better than other bears. 10. Giant insects. Imagine those mosquitoes from Jumanji, but real. 11. Haast's eagle. Capable of flying away with a child up to 40 pounds, and could crush an adult's skull. Having those things flying around would be absolutely terrifying. 12. Those flying sharks I saw in that documentary Sharknado. 13. Imagine asking all future animals which species they're glad went extinct, the answer would be humans every time lol. 14. Titanoboas. I already have a strong fear of snakes, but a python that can take down an elephant is something to be avoided. 15. Jeffrey Epstein. What did you buy as an adult because you were denied it as a child? 1. I bought an ice cream cake for no reason once. The freedom is palpable. 2. Box of 64 Crayola crayons, the one with the sharpener, also all the chocolate. 3. I finally bought a house and have left it largely empty because I grew up in a hoarding household. So I guess I technically bought space. 4. Hobbies for my kids, the ones they want. I wanted to play sports and play guitar but was always told no. It wasn't because of money, I was put unwillingly into other activities that I never asked for or wanted. So, when my kid asked for cello lessons at the age of 7, they got cello lessons. When my youngest said they wanted to give up soccer for ballet, we swapped soccer for ballet. My only rule is they have to finish the season. 5. Sometimes I eat dessert first, because I'm a grown man and no one can stop me. 6. Grapes. Effing grapes. They are a delicacy in my mind because my parents would never buy them because they were too expensive. The other thing, beverages in restaurants. We only ever got water. 7. An American Girl doll. I had a childhood friend who took a trip to NYC and surprised me with an American Girl doll. It was a just like you doll. I loved her so much. I didn't come from a great home life, being raised by a single parent. We had financial struggles. One day, my mom went behind my back and sold the doll. I was heartbroken, but my mom argued that we needed the money. I'm now 27 and just purchased my first American Girl doll. It was secondhand, bought through eBay, but I have no regrets. 8. I couldn't always eat fast food as a kid, so when I became an adult I ordered a ton of it all the time, and that was a mistake. 9. When I was little my grandma bought one of those fiber optic flower lamps. I was obsessed with it and always asked her to turn it on. She ended up putting it in an empty fish tank so I couldn't touch it. I now own 3 of them and I turn them on whenever I want. What are you gonna do now, Grandma? What is the funniest lie to tell kids? 1. That, as their father, I could change their names whenever I wanted to. One time I pretended to get on the phone with the Arizona name registry, and renamed my 2 kids Snargle and Gorf because they kept misbehaving. They were bawling. I could barely keep a straight face. 2. I was on a flight where a kid saw the button for calling a flight attendant, didn't know what it was but clearly was thinking about pressing it, and so asked his dad what it did. His dad said it opens a trapdoor under your seat and drops you out of the bottom of the plane. Afterwards, the kid spent the whole flight intrigued by the button, thinking about and talking about pushing it, but too worried to actually do it. 3. Not exactly a lie, but when I was first learning swear words, my parents made the mistake of telling me those were words only mommies and daddies are allowed to say. So I was playing house with my sister and her friends, and I was the dad. I promptly went on a swearing tirade as the dad and got in big trouble. 4. When we were in the car and it was raining, my mom would wait for a bridge or tunnel, and as we approached it she would tell us she was going to make the rain stop in 3, 2, 1. She told us she could only make the rain stop for a minute because it made her so tired. My siblings and I were convinced she was magic. 5. My friend's parents told her that moose weren't real growing up. Like, unicorns, and moose were both fictional creatures. When she got to high school someone was talking about seeing a moose and she thought they were trying to be funny, and basically she found out at 16 that moose are, in fact, real. When she went home to tell her parents, her mom was in tears of laughter. So yeah. Probably telling your kid growing up that a very existent animal is a fictional creature. 6. I convinced my kids I was a Jedi. I waved my right hand to turn up the volume on my car while secretly using my left hand to turn up the volume with the steering wheel controls. I did the same thing with the electronic controls for my seat. When they challenged me to do something else, I replied that I had already done too much because a Jedi should never use the Force for trivial things. 7. When me and my brothers were kids and complained about something, my dad would go to the phone and say hello. Complaint department? And describe our grievance. He said the complaint department for everybody was in Calgary and was run by someone called Chief Oakonowake, and he was getting tired of our complaints. I believed that for the longest time. Guys, what do girls do that they think is being cute but in reality is the furthest thing from it? 1. I had a girlfriend once who thought that purposefully missing her flights was cute and funny. She would ask me to take her to the airport, but whenever I got to her apartment she was either sleeping or not even packed yet because she claimed she forgot about the flight. After the 3rd time she did this, she said it was because she thought it made her look adorable being so forgetful. 2. Stop stealing my fucking clothes. I go to get a shirt, oh wait no it's not there. Why? Because you like to sleep in it because it makes you think of me. Dude, you've got like 12 of my shirts, are you building a nest? 3. Indirectly asking for things. For example, saying I'm so thirsty instead of can you get me a glass of water? 4. Taking hats. It's mad obnoxious and most of the time done in a very rough manner, like you just robbed my hat bitch and the whole reason I'm wearing one is cause my hair looks like shit today. You wouldn't like it if I ripped out your scrunchie or some shit. 5. Stop taking our goddamn food off our plate. 6. No means no. You jokingly asked if I wanted to try makeup on at the mall on our first date. I said no. You asked 6 more times. If I wasn't your ride home, I would have just walked away. 7. Treating a gay guy like he's your object. I've broken friendships with women over this because they treated me like I was their accessory. 8. Acting stupid, like truly stupid. 9. Hitting us when we say something you disapprove of. 10. Order a fucking salad at dinner then giggle as she picks at your meal. 11. Crazy is not cute, stop trying to be Harley Quinn. 12. Baby voice. I hate it, just use your normal voice when talking to me, none of this stupid higher pitched tone. 13. Tickling. One girl I was with would not fucking stop. For 25 minutes I told her to cut it out. I was tickle-graped. When did you realize you were attractive? 1. I'm not attractive but a girl did scream hey you're cute at me while I was pumping gas the other night. I'm sure she was drunk, but I'll be riding that ego boost for at least the next 3 months. 2. My dad started pointing out how many girls were checking me out whenever we were in public. I was always oblivious to it, mostly because I was in a long-term relationship and never really cared. Initially I laughed at the notion, but a few of my girlfriends have started to point out the same. 3. When I was told I was the highest quality meat at the gym, by an absolute babe. I felt so objectified. It was great. 4. In high school, my friends and I stumbled across a rally for 9/11 truthers and started to argue with them. At one point one of the truthers got fed up and told us to go away and get a life. He turned to me and said, "You're a good-looking guy. Why don't you go get a girlfriend?" It's rare to get that kind of compliment from someone who's pissed at you. 5. When I heard my little son 6 tell his friend, "No, I do not look like my mummy, I look like my dad, we are both handsome." 6. When a few of my female friends told me I used to have such a crush on you in high school. In fact, a lot of girls did. I never knew about it, so I never made any passes at them and went through high school thinking I looked like a potato. 7. I've had to put less and less effort into conversations over the years. 8. A really cute girl in my psych class put her hand on my shoulder in a conversation once, gave it a squeeze and then glanced at my shoulder. She made this little ooh sound, her eyes kinda glazed, and she started just kinda holding her hand there, lightly squeezing. I was pretty uncomfortable about it at this point and asked if she was okay. She just sorta smiled and said, "Yeah, much better thanks," pats my shoulder and turns away. I asked another girl what that was about and she just said, "Really? Girls like hot guys." 9. When I was a kid I never thought of myself as attractive. The boys at school, and the girls, made it very clear that I was a buck-toothed freak. We went on holiday to Cape Town December 1998, I was 13 then, and we were in a restaurant one day after a few days of sun and swimming and I went to the bathroom. As I was washing my hands I looked up into the mirror and suddenly my face looked different. Guess the tan paid off well against sun-bleached blonde hair. I just stared at myself and wondered if it really was me. I didn't recognize myself. Shrugged it off and went back to my family, but I then started noticing that grown-ass men were staring at me. It freaked me out. Boys started wanting to hang out with me on the beach. It freaked me out. I was never hot and I never wanted to be. But that was the day I realized that I wasn't a total troll. What are lesser-known biological differences between men and women? 1. Men are more prone to stutter. Moderate stutter is 3 times more likely in men. A severe stutter 10 times more likely. 2. Women have longer teeth than men. 3. Blood flow in a man's body is more even than a woman's body. In females, blood flows more around the core and the baby-making zones, which explains why women's hands and feet get colder than men. 4. Only women can pass on mitochondrial DNA to their children, so if you're a male with a mitochondrial defect of some kind, the disease will end with you. 5. Women and men can have different symptoms when having a heart attack. 6. Men are better able to pick up on and focus on a singular sound than women. It's really not all that useful anymore, now that we've moved away from our hunter-gatherer roots. But if your child is a musician in an orchestra, dad has a better chance of being able to single them out and listen to them more individually than mom. 7. Men have slightly larger veins than women and it is easier to draw blood from men than women on average. 8. Collagen fibers under the skin of men are more criss-crossy than in women, which both explains why women are more prone to cellulite, and also why men have an easier time opening jars. 9. Males have longer eyelashes than females do. So technically using mascara isn't making you look more feminine, it's making you look more masculine. 10. Our view is different. Women have a wider peripheral vision, making them able to spot something more quickly. Men have tunnel vision, giving them better depth perception. 11. The classic stereotypical female handwriting appears to have a scientific basis. Girls develop fine motor skills earlier than boys, and also have a tendency to grip pens and writing implements differently, apparently due to nails, which affects their motor skills when writing. 12. Men have more sweat glands than women. Which is why when I come back from an hour at the gym my shoes smell like Fritos, but a girl who wears flats all day takes them off and all you smell is lotion. 13. Men are 4 times more likely to be autistic than women. 14. Men walk in a different gait to women when they stand up because they do a cheeky sidestep to unstick their sack from their leg. What is the dumbest thing you've ever done while you were high? 1. I microwaved cheesecake because stoned me found it odd that it was always served cold and not hot like it should be. And on a related note, piping hot cheesecake will take those munchies away real quick. 2. I saw tiny bugs crawling over a little flower among the grass. I realized they had never heard music before, poor lil guys, so I put my phone next to the flower and gave them the concert of a lifetime. 3. playing video games with my bro, split screen Modern Warfare 3. I'm absolutely crushing it, then I realized I'm looking at the wrong screen. My dude is in a corner moving and shooting the wall. 4. Once I was looking at the moon and I was just noticing the details in it, and I took a step forward to get a closer look like a dumbass. 5. One night I go in the backyard to get high. I leave the backyard lights off so that my older neighbors can't see what I'm doing cause I'm immature like that lol. I got a glass of ice water in one hand and I stepped into my pitch black backyard. Every time I move I hear a sound like there is an animal stalking me in the many bushes in my backyard. Whenever I stop the sound stops, but once I start moving again it sounds to me like the leaves in the bushes in our backyard are rustling and there is an animal in them. If I try to go back toward my back door the sound follows me. If I move further into the backyard, the sound follows me. I am legit freaking out thinking there is a big animal stalking me in my backyard. Turns out it was just the ice in my drink clinking every time I moved. I never felt so stupid in my life. 6. One time when I was in high school, my mom went grocery shopping and of course I used her time away to smoke a joint. When she came back with the groceries, she called me out to the car to help bring them inside. I put some Vicine in, slipped on my flip-flops and headed for the car. As I'm bringing the groceries in maybe 2-3 bags at a time, I'm bringing them all the way to my bedroom instead of the kitchen. My mom locks the car, walks in the kitchen and says, "Where the hell are the groceries?" I'm standing there eyes bloodshot because the Vicine didn't kick in yet like, oh shit. 7. I got super blazed one night near the beginning of pandemic lockdown, and went across the street to the drugstore to get some chips and such. As I approached the automatic glass doors I saw a person standing on the other side, so I waited for them to come through. I stood there waiting for what felt like an eternity. I was getting frustrated, like, what's up with this clown? Can't they see I'm waiting for them? Then I realized it was just my reflection. 8. Was holding my cereal in one hand and phone in the other. Went to toss the phone on my bed, tossed the cereal instead. What made the weird kid at your school weird? 1. Had one girl in my year who had a weird obsession with our physics teacher. Then in a lesson learning about spinning forces she asked if she could show a cool video to the class, he said yes. The video was of her spinning on a pole in her underwear. When he sent her out she was yelling the whole way, "Why? Are you saying that pole dancing is sexual? Cause that's sexist." She wore butt-skimming skirts with fishnet tights and corsets on non-uniform day as well. Always got sent straight home. They ended up expelling her when we were about 17.2, the Vine where a kid goes, "I have the power of God and anime on my side," and screams like a banshee went to my middle school. He was maybe 4 grades underneath me but his weirdness turned him into one of the most popular kids in his grade. 3. Kid smelled like he bathed in cat pee every day. Hissed at anyone who came near him. Used to run through the hallways from class to class. Threatened to unalive me in a computer lab because I used Internet Explorer instead of Firefox. 4. There was a kid in my school who was obsessed with Mario. He had Mario sweatshirts and notebooks, and a Mario backpack. Well, someone figured out that if you told him Mario is dead he'd flip. Scream and cry, "Fuck you, no he's not," every time. He got in trouble multiple times for attacking kids who said anything about Mario dying, even if they were talking about in the context of Smash Bros or something. This happened 8th to 10th grade, then I never saw him again. 5. Kid always wore a zoot suit, every day. Not that weird I guess. But back in high school, weird as fuck. 6. He would toss off in the middle of class. He didn't actually pull it out, but he would aggressively rub the side of his pants and his face would get really red while staring at the girls in the class. Everybody noticed but a word was never spoken about it. 7. One kid was obsessed with all Asian culture, kind of random since we lived in a very rural community in Canada with little connection to the outside world, let alone to Asia, and would lose her mind if anyone said anything remotely negative about it. It started out as mainly just a fixation on Pokemon, anime, and K-pop, but quickly branched out to all things Asian. She once hit me with a textbook because we were discussing M. Butterfly in class, and I said that I didn't like it. This was at age 16. 8. He would have full conversations, arguments, and sometimes physical altercations with a brick column in the middle of the cafeteria. 9. My weird kid stood up at an assembly and asked the vice principal if she knew what hentai was. 10. He wrote his crush's name on the wall in the bathroom, with his own shit. They caught him brown-handed. Also would freak out if someone said werewolf. 11. He gave himself a swirly because nobody ever got one in the 3 years he was there. What are some very comforting facts? 1. The vast majority of people with a first-time seizure will never have another seizure again and will not need lifelong anti-seizure medication. Everybody gets one freebie. 2. I once found a ladybug in my room in the middle of winter. I tried to look up if I could feed it somehow, and found countless other people asking the same question. The world is full of people who have compassion enough to feed a lone bug in the winter. 3. Crows will let other crows know if you're a good person. Feeding a crow in your backyard can quickly become many crows over time since the rumor spreads. And nearby crows in your area will know you as one they like. They can also be known to be protective of you and even bring you gifts. Suffice to say, crows are one of the most intelligent creatures on the planet and they are truly underrated. 4. There is a group of bikers called Bikers Against Child Abuse who support child abuse victims in court by looking tough and giving the kids confidence to testify against their abusers. It's actually an international group. 5. Jupiter has been protecting Earth from almost every stray asteroid strike coming in from out of the solar system since the planets first formed. 6. Nurse here. If you're having a general anesthetic for a routine operation, and worried about dying while under, please be aware there are about 7 different levels of stuff we can do to bring you back.
So if the thing we normally do doesn't work, we've got plan B, then we've got plan C, D, E, F, G and H, and we rarely need to even go to plan C, let alone the rest.
I've been qualified 15 years and it's literally never happened anywhere I've worked. 8. The ozone layer is slowly repairing itself. 9. If you quit smoking by age 40, your life expectancy is the same as a non-smoker. It's never too late to quit. 10. Nobody pays all that much attention to you. Everyone is the main character in their story and thinks you're just another supporting role or an NPC. I find this very freeing. 11. Your pets will forgive you if you accidentally step on them.